Tucker Carlson is perhaps one of the largest anti-war voices in all of alternative media, and that's perhaps why they let him go from Fox News, particularly for his voice against the Ukraine war. So we've been lucky enough here at Redacted to have Tucker on the show over the years for some deep dive conversations ranging from everything to the Iran war currently, to Israel's control of Washington, D.C., to UFOs and what those actually are, and to some really interesting discussions around journalism in the year 2026. So sit back now and enjoy this compilation of some deep dive conversations with our friend Tucker Carlson. So over the past 24 hours, President Trump says we've won the war against Iran, and he wants this war in Iran wrapped up quickly. Great. So pack up your shit and get the hell out of there. We would love that. But of course, the reality is Israel doesn't want this war wrapped up quickly. We know that. They want the entire government structure of Iran destroyed. And the only way to do that, of course, is with boots on the ground. You cannot have regime change with airstrikes. It's never worked in the history of aviation, so it's not going to happen in Iran. If Israel truly wants this, they can't do it alone, of course. Their army is only about 170,000 active duty soldiers, and then if you roll in all of their reservists, about 150,000 reserve soldiers, Iran's army is triple that size. So they need the United States. They need American soldiers and boots on the ground. And now senators are openly warning that this could lead to American boots on the ground. Here's Senator Richard Blumenthal after a private briefing with the White House this week. Watch.
I am most concerned about the threat to American lives of potentially deploying our sons and daughters on the ground in Iran. We seem to be on a path toward deploying American troops on the ground in Iran to accomplish any of the potential objectives here.
So, as part of the new National Defense Authorization Act, of course, the involuntary draft has been renewed as part of this. Of course, Congress would have to step in and fully approve it, but by the end of this year, an involuntary draft could take place in the United States. We talked to the great Dan McAdams yesterday from the Ron Paul Institute about this piece. This is a piece that he is most concerned about. Watch.
This war is very, very obviously unconstitutional. You're going to be forced now to be in a situation where you will be automatically registered for the draft. And a lot of people are salivating at the idea of starting a draft, of sharing the burden. You know, the problem with this, as Dr. Paul says, is the presumption is that the government owns you, that owns your body, that you are a slave. And that just simply isn't the case.
Of course, that's terrifying, but it's also something's got to give here. Either the Trump administration says enough is enough, we're happy with this new Ayatollah, or Israel says we're going all in because we're not stopping. So nuclear war, perhaps. Again, it appears America and Israel do not appear to want the same outcome in this at this stage, or maybe they never did, and they don't really appear to be on the same page at all. So Trump at least publicly seems to want this over fast, but Netanyahu's government is talking about something much bigger. Sources in Israel have told us that the real goal in southern Lebanon, that bombing, is to create a demilitarized zone, very similar to Gaza. In other words, Israel wants to turn southern Lebanon into the Gaza Strip, devoid of Hezbollah and devoid of, presumably, human life as well.
Meanwhile, we would like to remind you that in June of 2025, our next guest, Tucker Carlson, warned about a war with Iran, and his warnings were not heeded. We're going to talk to him in just a moment, but let's take a look at a few of the things that he predicted. Number one, he warned that a war with Iran would be hard because they have a well-stocked arsenal of ballistic missiles aimed at U.S. bases and energy infrastructure of our allies, and they would use them in those directions. That would be bad. There's victory lap number one we're about to give him. Number two, he warned that this would further ally Iran with China and Russia because it would turn those countries against the U.S. There's victory lap number two. Now, the third victory lap that we'd like to offer him when he comes up in a second is that he predicted that Trump voters would feel betrayed by this, and it could end his presidency. Of course, I don't hate Trump, but I don't care at all what happens to his presidency. I care what happens to the American people. So, Tucker Carlson, without further ado, thank you for joining us on Redacted today. We're going to give you an opportunity for those victory laps and give you an opportunity to let us know, how do you think this is going to play out for the American people, given the prescience of your tweet almost a year ago?
Oh, gosh. I wouldn't give myself credit for prescience. I think it was also obvious, and the effects were so predictable. The disruption to global energy supplies, the effects on the U.S. economy, the end of U.S. military bases, probably in some or all of the Gulf states, the loss of control over the Persian Gulf by the United States, the shrinking of American empire. I mean, you can make a case for all of those things, but this is not the way to do it. The way it's been done is so damaging to the United States. You have to believe, and I do believe, that that was one of the goals, which was to weaken the U.S. and get us out of the Middle East. And, conceptually, that's not, I've never been in favor of American empire because I don't think it helps the United States. Okay. It hasn't, I don't think. However, once you have a global empire and you're responsible for trade routes and you write the rules of diplomacy and war and what we've done for 80 years, you can't just turn it off in a day or your country will be severely damaged. And I'm afraid that we're moving down that path. Like in 5 years, who's going to secure the Straits of Hormuz? Probably China. Who will occupy, those now damaged and destroyed bases? I don't know. I'm just guessing. I hope I'm wrong, but it wouldn't shock me if it were China. More immediately, who's going to bring an end to this conflict? It can't go on forever, because this is the center of global energy, and not just energy, petrochemicals, fertilizer, things countries actually need. They're non-negotiable things, resources. And so the world has an interest in ending this, particularly Asia, South Korea, Japan, China. They're all dependent on this energy. So, who brokers the peace here? It's not the U.S. We don't have diplomacy anymore. We're so discredited. Our diplomacy is seen by the rest of the world as like a cover for war. This is all like a sneaky attempt to, launch a sneak attack. And whether that's true or not, you pray it's not true, but everyone thinks it's true. So we're not going to negotiate an end to this. I don't know. The losses for the U.S. are so sad that I just can't take a victory lap. I just feel depressed.
Yeah, it is absolutely depressing because so many pieces are moving at once with the U.S. economy right now. Fertilizer prices skyrocketing, food prices set to go up. We already see inflation, the numbers over the past 24 hours going up. So all of this is going to be hitting the American family pretty hard, who was already hit very, very hard. And we just got this statement. I want to read to you. I'm sure you've already seen it. Iran's new leader, Khamenei, just released the first statement as supreme leader, released it to Iranian television. It was read. He didn't appear on video or anything like that. But among the points that he made, the Strait of Hormuz will be shut down forever until the United States begs, basically. We will not ignore the blood of our martyrs. They will be avenged, basically an eye for an eye. We are not an enemy of the countries around us. We're only targeting American bases, he said, but bombs are raining on your neighbors anyway as a result of that. Close all U.S. bases in the region or we will attack them all. And he calls for total Iranian unity. He says, we will not forgo avenging the blood of the martyrs. Every citizen killed by the enemy is a case for vengeance in itself. So it doesn't sound like they're done, even though President Trump yesterday said we've won this war. It doesn't sound like this is over anytime soon.
I mean, it certainly doesn't. And Trump yesterday suggested we might use nuclear weapons in Iran. So no, those are escalatory remarks. They're not, consensus-seeking remarks. However, that country, maybe not this country, but certainly Iran, seems to have lots of different factions. And of course, they just threw the board in the air. A lot of people were killed. Like, it's not exactly clear who's running the country, who's making the key decisions. But my impression is there are different factions, and some, seek some sort of negotiated settlement sooner rather than later. But clearly there are a lot of people there after all the civilian deaths, after the killing of their religious leader, and after the failed diplomacy, who, want to fight till the end. The question is, what does that mean? And I just worry that, Israel is going to find itself in a position where, it uses weapons of mass destruction. I'm not even attacking Israel, by the way. It's the size of New Jersey. So, you can see why they would feel threatened. I don't think they should ever use nuclear weapons. I think the United States should tell the Netanyahu government absolutely not. In fact, we're going to secure Dimona. We're going to secure your nuclear sites. You're not allowed to use nuclear weapons because that could begin a cascade that ends the world. So you're not allowed to do that, actually, Netanyahu. But you do understand how if their cities are getting bombed and the United States can't stop that from happening and they run out of missile defense or adequate missile defense and maybe the bombing moves to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, I mean, you can see this getting super radical, which is one of the main arguments I made against starting it in the first place. You don't control it once it starts. There are other players here. I didn't realize it was going to be a joint operation with a country that believes in Amalek. Whoever made that decision should be in jail.
Yeah.
When was the last time the U.S. military partnered on a decision-making level with another country in a war? Like, that's crazy. You can have symbolic partners, but you can't have a partner who has co-equal decision-making authority because your interests are different. And you could wind up harming your own interests and those of the world very gravely. So you don't do that because you can't make a clear decision. And I think that we're not far from that right now. Like, their goals have always been different from our goals. Trump was convinced they had a nuclear program. I thought that was silly, but he seemed to believe it. He was also under immense pressure from the Israelis to do this because they were going to do it anyway, as the Secretary of State revealed. That's true. But I don't think there was any evidence that Trump wanted, to commit ground troops to Iran or some protracted war over, the killing of a religious leader or Amalek or these weird end times fantasies that honestly both sides are engaging in, the Israelis especially, just being honest. Amalek? Are you kidding? How can, but by the way, Western civilization has no place for Amalek.
Can you explain to our audience if someone's watching and have no idea what the hell that is? It's absolutely insane.
Okay. So Amalek there are many references to Amalek in what we call the Old Testament. Jews will call the Torah. And Amalek has reference to the Amalekites, who are the historic enemies of the Jewish people and who I think pursued them as they fled slavery in Egypt. Okay. So there are many references to it, but the critical reference is in 1 Samuel 15, in which God commands the Jews to kill the Amalekites. Amalek, all of them. And I mean, literally kill all of them. Men, women, children, infants, I'm quoting now, sheep and camels. All trace of Amalek disappeared. Genocide, actually literal genocide, like they never existed. So the Jews, their leader, I think it was Samuel, fails. He leaves with some alive and he doesn't kill all the camels. And God punishes him for not wiping Amalek off the face of the earth. So whatever you think of that as a theological matter or moral matter, that's in the text. Christians reject it completely. There's no Christian concept of Amalek. Genocide is alien to Christianity. It's anathema to Christianity. It's a grave sin. Murdering innocents is a grave sin in Christianity. That's not the theology of Netanyahu. He has used the term Amalek repeatedly since October 7th, including on the day that the bombing started in Iran, and described the Iranians as Amalek. So here you have the supposedly Western leader in like a necktie and like a Western haircut. He kind of looks like maybe he's from Europe or the US, but his attitudes are not Western. They're Eastern, they're medieval, they're primitive, they're scary, they're genocidal. And we know that not because we hate him and we're making up things he said, because we're listening to him say Amalek repeatedly to his people and to the world. So the idea that that guy is your partner or your friend or your ally or any kind of person you'd even want to have dinner with is insane. That person's way more dangerous. Who's more dangerous than that? For a head of state to say out loud, our job here is to kill everybody, including their children, because the bloodline itself must be extinguished. I'm very opposed to Hitler, okay? Just saying. I don't think Hitler ever said anything like that. I'm serious. I mean, he killed a ton of people, including a ton of Jews, of course. But I don't think, was Hitler ever on the record saying we need to exterminate every single member of a specific bloodline? Maybe. I haven't read it. Netanyahu just said that last week. Yes, he did. And he said it many other times. This is bonkers.
Yes. I want to ask you about influence inside the White House, because as someone who follows the conversation online, and you've said so this week, that you visited the White House several times, I think you said 3 in the last year. And every time that gets reported on Twitter, that feels like a salve to my soul, because I think there's an adult in the room. There's someone who is part of the anti-war faction that does have connections in the White House. And it plays out very much like a Game of Thrones because we can't put the horse back in the barn, because the war did go forward. And so we are left wondering, is Trump really the Joffrey Baratheon here, or are there many Littlefingers? Maybe you don't watch Game of Thrones, but the Littlefinger character is very much
you forget Tucker
saboteur.
doesn't own a television.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you know these characters
true.
or not. Do you know what I mean by Littlefinger? Is this sort of smarmy saboteur who is getting bad things to happen and puppeteering people in power?
AKA Lindsey Graham.
Or Laura Bloomer. Those kind of. So what is your take on how many of those archetypes are in the White House?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I was there 3 times actually in a month, in the month preceding the war, and talked to the president by phone a bunch of times. So I definitely talked a lot to him about this, and my views haven't changed in 10 years. I thought then, I think now, that the U.S. getting into a war with Iran would be a disaster for the U.S. That's my concern. I'm not a secret Shiite, but I am an American. So I just have the same position I've always had. Trump had that position too, as you well know. So the question is, how did this happen? I don't work there, so obviously, so I don't really know, and I don't want to pretend I know more than I do. But my impression is that there weren't a lot of prominent people in the White House pushing for this. As far as I understand, again, could be wrong, but I understand most of the principals, the people with the big jobs at the White House understood the risks. I think the president understood the risk. I mean, he did understand the risks, and generally, and I don't think any of them were pushing for it. I think all the pressure, or most of the pressure, came from the outside. It came directly from Netanyahu. And in the end, my impression is what was decisive was Netanyahu's threat to just do it anyway. And meanwhile, you've got like 1 million Americans living in the Middle East, and you've got all these bases on the Gulf of Arabia, Persian Gulf. And you've got Israel, with which we have an implied defense guarantee. And so you have a lot of U.S. assets and Americans downrange from the Iranian response. So I think the idea was, well, now we have to go. Well, that raises the really obvious question, which is like, well, why would Israel be in charge of that decision? Israel is a proxy, it's a client state. I mean, they wouldn't exist except for the United States. They wouldn't have nuclear weapons if they hadn't stolen the material from the United States, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not an attack on Israel. It's just an acknowledgement that a country of 9 million is not allowed to boss around a country of 350 million, because that's crazy. But that's what happened. And so why did nobody call Netanyahu and say, listen, son, I understand you don't like Iran, get it. They funded Hezbollah, get it. But you can't go to war with them, because this is the main route through which global energy flows. So we have an interest, the world has an interest. And moreover, we have all these assets there. So this affects us, and we're saying no. And as far as I know, and I definitely have asked a lot, that was never under consideration. And so then the final question is, well, why? Why would it not be the obvious first step to constrain a client state when it was about to do something that hurt you? Why is that off limits? Why are you not allowed to do that? And, we can only guess. And some of the guesses are very dark, and they may be true. I can't prove it, but you have to ask yourself, like, what force could be that powerful that a president, knowing this is not going to help him or his nation, does it anyway? And, I don't know the answer. And if I did, I would just say it.
You talk about the collective punishment, and
it's disgusting.
I think we're sort of crossing a Rubicon now in the United States, and it sort of terrifies me. Do you think that the U.S. is drifting into like a moral framework that it doesn't even recognize in itself anymore?
Are we adopting the ethics of the Israeli government?
Yeah,
obviously, and by the way, I don't. Israel's a very complicated topic, and there are 9 million people live there, and not all of them agree with this stuff. But the Israeli government has been moving ever more openly toward this policy where I don't like the guy, but I'm also going to kill his kids because they could grow up to be that guy. And that is the antithesis of Western civilization. That's the distinction between East and West. Western civilization, Christian civilization, rejects that. That's not just like a piece of our civilization. That's the foundation stone of our civilization. That's why we don't put families on trial for the crimes of the father, whereas other countries do. But we don't. We never have. We never can, because that's the opposite of justice. Like that, this is the most basic concept in the West. God created each person as an individual, and as an individual, you'll be judged for what you do, not for what your ancestors did, not for what your children did, for what you did. the primacy of the individual created by God, the existence of the individual soul, that's the basis of what we used to call human rights. Human rights apply to whom? Humans, all of them, by virtue of the fact they're human. That's where the rights come from God, because he made humans in his image. It's literally the basis of everything that we have. And so subtly over time, due to kind of, the normal decadence-inspired stupidity of rich countries, we've kind of forgotten that. And you wake up one morning and like, oh, it's okay to kill an entire group of people because you don't like what some of them did. And at the same time, we're screaming about how anti-Semitism is wrong. Well, why? Anti-Semitism is wrong. I agree. Why? Because it is always wrong to blame people for things they didn't do, to hold them accountable for their bloodline. And so anti-Semitism is absolutely wrong. And it's precisely as wrong, no more, no less, than hating Arabs for being Arabs, or hating whites for being whites, which is the most common form of bias in this country. It's embedded in our government, against hating blacks for being black. It's all the same. And yet the same people who are constantly telling you that anti-Semitism is the greatest threat have actively abetted anti-white discrimination for like 60 years. Like the ADL is fully on board with keeping people from getting jobs or college admissions or federal grants because they're white. So then you reach the conclusion they don't care about human rights. They don't acknowledge their existence. They believe in tribal rights. My tribe gets these rights, yours doesn't. That attitude, precisely that attitude, will destroy the United States. First of all, it's totally against Christianity. It's totally against Western civilization. But it also, as a practical matter, is the road to violent civil war.
And maybe the moral part of this is if you can remove yourself, you can remove the human element of it, and you can, of course, then use AI or autonomous targeting of, these individuals, right? And so that is a concern that certainly is top of mind after the targeting of the Minab girls' school strike, and whether or not AI machine-assisted targeting played any kind of role in it, where it sort of absolves us of the moral conundrum here, and we can say, no, it was AI, it was a mistake, it was, we can't really have our hands in that. It was humans weren't involved in that because it was AI, it was Palantir, whatever it was. Have you, in your massive connections and any kind of discussions you've had with maybe sources in the White House, have heard that maybe AI was in any way involved in that?
Well, actually, it's funny you said that. I don't know much about much, but I'm interested in this subject, and I know people involved in it, so I've definitely learned about it over the past 6 months. And yes, there are examples of ongoing wars, not any I'm aware of in this war, but in other conflicts ongoing, where targeting decisions have been made by machines with no human sign-off. So I find that one of the most shocking things, and that's a fact.
With no human sign-off.
That's correct. That's correct. The data are input into the, I think the targets are loaded or something, but at the end stage, it's just identify, kill. And so that to me is a profound change and really, really distressing. It's like the pager attacks, 100x, the pager attacks where we put bombs in these pagers and then they kind of circulate and we hope that they blow the legs off the right people, but there's no way to know. Oh. That's not acceptable. That's an act of terror. And yes, I'm aware that bad people were killed, but innocent people were killed. So that's an act of terror in my view. Not by my view, that's by definitionally, it's an act of terror. I think it's very closely related to autonomous weapons. And you saw this really interesting argument fight break out between a big AI company and the administration right before the Iran war. And the company made the case that, look, we are not into two things. We are not into autonomous weapons, and we're not into mass surveillance in the United States. And they lost their contracts famously. And there was so much going on at the time that I didn't look quite closely enough into it, but I have since. And I do think those were the sticking points. And maybe I'm being misled, but I believe that's right. Autonomous weapons and mass surveillance in the U.S., both of which are totally unacceptable, both under our Constitution and under our existing moral framework. So, but as to the bombing of the girls' school attached to the Iranian military base, I actually called around today on that because I'm really bothered by it. And the response that I got was, yes, AI is involved in all of this, but under current protocol, and in this specific case, a human being pressed play on this. Okay, so there was a human. But here's the question. Where'd the coordinates come from?
Right.
Right.
Who fed those coordinates to the United States military? This was the United States military. Now, we know that most of our SIGIN, our signals information, our electronically gathered information from Iran is translated by Israel because they're our partner in this venture. Well, we have two different aims. Israel wants the total destruction of Iran. And at this point, I think the United States, I can say, kind of just wants to get out. So Israel has every incentive to encourage the United States, intentionally or not, to do things that cross the point of no return, where a diplomatic solution is really not possible. One of them would be killing the head of Shia Islam, who's 86 and has prostate cancer. Why would you do that? That'd be one. Once you kill their religious leader, you're kind of all in. And another would be, at least potentially, killing the daughters of Iranian naval officers. And so I don't know that happened, and I don't want to suggest that I do because I don't. But as this is investigated, I hope the question of where the targeting coordinates came from is raised and answered, because they certainly had motive to do that. Because again, it's not even an attack on Israel. Their goals are different from ours. And so to partner with a country in a war that has a different end game than you do is one of the craziest things this country's ever done.
Well, right. And if as you've made the case beautifully over the last week, if Israel is trying to sabotage the American government to get them to leave the region and no longer be a competitive superpower, which would mean that they don't have our best interests at heart, then this technology, which is born and used in Israel first and foremost, the Palantir Maven software is used to track people in coordination with data miner, which can also cross-check your social media and target you. And so the things that we've worried about the most have come to fruition, being led into a war by our model ally, according to the Department of War. And so what we worry about next is that it will be targeted towards us. And that seems like a real possibility, that your social media will target you as someone to be tracked in order to, and can you play out worst case scenario? Because we already are in one, what would be the next?
Well, big picture, it's just always true everywhere that war changes societies faster than anything else. It's a great accelerant of social change. And a lot of the big social changes in our society over the past couple hundred years grow out of the changes during war. And some good, some bad, but always big. And one of the changes you see in every society, you've seen it in Israeli society. The Israel of 2026 bears no resemblance as a visitor to the Israel that I visited in years past. It's just seems like a different country, different attitudes, different people. One of the reasons for that is a 7-front war. If you're constantly fighting wars and people are dying, your tolerance for brutality, your anger at the people you're fighting, everything about your attitudes changes very, very fast. They harden, and you become much more tolerant of atrocities than you would be in peacetime. That's just a fact. And you become much more tolerant of hurting your own citizens, people who disagree. You saw this in Great Britain during World War II. Winston Churchill, who I know we're required to, deify, presided over the imprisonment of his opposition party during the entire length of the war, and their families and their wives. They were rotting in prison away from their little kids, in some cases their infants. And their crime was being the opposition party and being disloyal and unpatriotic. They weren't. The opposition party was led by a First World War hero who fought not just as, a pilot in the sky, but and in the trenches, like one of the great war heroes, former member of parliament the country ever produced. And he and his wife and his compatriots and their wives were interned without charges by Winston Churchill for the duration of the war. And that happened in Britain, which is much more humane than a lot of places. So, we should not, FDR interned the Japanese, including American citizens. That stuff happens during war. And so I think we should be on guard for sure. I don't want to be paranoid or, creeped out or inspire paranoia or fear in other people, but I think it's worth worrying about it. And rule by technology is clearly one of the goals. What else is the end game? If the U.S. government doesn't spend, relatively speaking, much time trying to improve the lives of the people who pay for it, like the citizens of the country, you either get some kind of revolt where people are like, this isn't working. Why would I pay my taxes? Why would I put up with this? Or you respond to people's legitimate concerns, make a good faith effort to make their lives better, or you use technology to enslave them and shut them down so their opinions don't matter. Those are kind of the three options. I'm hoping for number two, but you can certainly see the incentive to use technology against Americans to stop their bitching. I saw today, who's the guy with the eyebrows on Facebook?
Ben Shapiro?
Ben Shapiro. I'm so sorry to be mean. Yes, Ben Shapiro was calling everybody who disagrees with him, left and right, because it's a horseshoe theory. He's sort of right about that, actually. But the party of discontent, or the party of complaining. You're complaining.
Yes.
Why are you complaining so much? The guy's like got 105 IQ and he got into Harvard. So it's like, I'm thinking he might have been the beneficiary of some special treatment. He and Bill Ackman both went to Harvard, and they're both kind of dumb. So it just tells you that this is, these are the people who run the country. This is the ruling class. Every nation has one. But to get a lecture from them about how you've got it easy, stop complaining.
Yes.
Right. And oh wait, I'm supposed to be compliant because there's no outrage from Ben Shapiro or the others about that we're turning into with the central bank digital currency, or as Catherine Austin Fitts has so rightly put about the control grid, and we're handing over all of our data to these big tech oligarchs and no one's speaking out against it. We're supposed to just be compliant and not complain. Shut up, you little, I mean, really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've thought a lot about it I wrote a book about this almost 10 years ago, like what has gone wrong in the United States. And my first thought was, well, we have a ruling class. This is supposed to be an egalitarian country. Well, there is no egalitarian country. There's a ruling class in every country, always, from the beginning of time to the end of time. So the question is not, do you have a ruling class? You do. The question is, how do they feel about the people they rule? And I think the key difference between the people in charge now and the people in charge, say, 60 years ago is the people in charge now really dislike the population. And I think it's obvious in the results, in declining life expectancy and the degradation of physical health, and 20% of white girls are on OnlyFans, or just name your measurement. It's like there's an intentional degradation, an intentional abandonment of the population that can only be attributed to loathing and contempt. And I think that's really scary. And so people who hate you probably predisposed to hurt you if they can. And if they have the technology to make it easy to do that, to constrain you from talking or expressing your opinions or having certain thoughts or going certain places, like they'll probably use that technology in order to do it, right? I mean, you can't assume any goodwill from people like that.
Absolutely.
You just can't.
No, and you can't accept any goodwill or expect any goodwill from the mainstream media at all. And the propagandists in the mainstream media is something that we all three of us actually know really, really well.
All right, we're going to talk about mainstream TV and its pro-war factions. Basically, everything that you get on the boob tube will sell you this war. Now, we have Tucker Carlson as a guest today. Clayton warned me, Tucker doesn't watch TV, so don't use a lot of pop culture reference. So, Tucker, I just cut 4 inches off my hair today. And I said, I will keep cutting my hair and pull a Mulan if they try to draft my son. And Clayton said, Tucker's not going to get that reference. Mulan? No?
It's a Disney reference.
No idea.
All right.
No idea. But I was thinking both about cutting your hair, and I need a new wig, obviously, myself. And then drafting your son. I mean, that's so, it's, I don't think that would, by the way, there's going to be no draft. Who would join? Who would obey? Some, I guess, people took the COVID shot, but I think they would have to give the slots to illegal aliens. They have to arm foreign nationals. A lot of people want to do that.
Which may have been the plan all along.
I agree with that.
So, I mean, what the reference is Mulan is the Chinese story of the young girl who cut off who went to war in place of her dad. And so all that to say, if they try and take my son, they're going to get a fiery 5'2" Latina instead, because they will not take my boy for a war based on this lie. So let's talk a bit about propaganda, because this week you had a show about this propaganda that's being used to sell the war. The White House is now resorting to using pop culture, movies, video games. Here's one they put out today, which is basically the Nintendo Wii. It really conveying the idea that the U.S. military is heroic and unstoppable, and that human life is nothing more than a video game avatar. I find this very insulting. But this is not new, and I brought an artifact to show this. During World War II, the Treasury Department literally hired Disney to teach Americans that paying taxes was patriotic because it bought bombs and tanks. Now, it's amazing to watch this. We're just going to show a few seconds, but you can watch the whole 7 minutes if you just search for The New Spirit, 1942. And here is Donald Duck telling us we need to pay taxes to beat the Axis. Watch.
Your country is at war. Your country needs taxes for guns, taxes for ships, taxes for democracy, taxes to beat the Axis.
Taxes to beat the Axis.
So my question to you is, will it work this time? It does not seem to be working.
No, of course it won't work. I mean, because, by the way, propaganda only works if there's a predicate for it. Like, you got to lay the foundation for the propaganda, which you then repeat. Taxes against the Axis, but that assumes you know who the Axis is and why it's bad. But I don't think that anyone has even bothered to explain why we should be taking military action against Iran. Yeah, they might have nukes, but then you told us in June that we eliminated that threat. So, like, what is this? I don't really understand what, and again, I felt like I was fairly close to it, but I still never have understood why the U.S. population was never brought on board, or no one even made a good faith effort to bring them on board. And I find that a little more chilling, because the message is, it's not even worth propagandizing you. It's not even worth lying to you. We're just going to do it anyway, because what are you going to do about it? That's the vibe that I got anyway. And that would be, you know, a big change.
Why do you think so many TV news anchors, the mainstream media, are so comfortable right now sort of repeating the government lines in real time without any sort of checks on it whatsoever? No one's really questioning how this war ends. What is the goal? What is the end game? The embedded sort of Pentagon media that is, you know, now inside the Pentagon. I call it like access journalism, which just infuriates the hell out of me, because it's like the Fox Newses of the world, the MSNBCs, the NBCs, or whatever, that want to have interviews with high-profile members of the administration. And so the only way to really do that, of course, is to just kiss their ass and to not ask the tough questions, and so to have them on a regular basis in that capacity. But no one's really asking the tough questions about how this thing ends. What is the timetable for getting out of this? What does the off-ramp look like? There's, to me, total media malpractice. What do you see?
I mean, it's there, you know, because you worked there for so long. It's a lot of things. One is just shallowness. You know, these are people who know that their jobs are a lot less significant than viewers imagine they are. They're just reading some script. Right. And so it's kind of exciting to be talking about something big and historically important, like a war, and you have no sense what that actually looks like. No one's ever actually seen a war. Those who have are a little less anxious to talk like that, but most of these people haven't. Some of them are not super geniuses. A lot of them are pretty nice, but they just don't know what they're talking about. The other factor is they know it's the red line. That's the red line. Like, you could get on TV, you know, there's so much like pretending that the red line is about race. And like, if I got on TV and said, actually, black people commit an awful lot of crimes, that I'd be fired. It's like, not really, actually. Not really. Nobody really cares. If you get on TV and say something like, why are we supporting Ukraine in a war against Putin? Like, why should we be enemies with Putin? Woo. Right. Like, the war stuff's not a joke. That's what they really, really care about. And I just know that from extensive experience. Then the question is, well, why is that the one thing they really care about? Why was Rupert Murdoch on the phone with Trump constantly for the past year begging him to start a war with Iran, which he was? And wow. Why are his media outlets, the New York Post, the Wall Street Journal, and then most obviously Fox News, relentlessly pushing for this? And I mean pushing in a monochromatic way. Like, there was one person whose name I don't want to mention because I don't want to hurt this person, who asked one question like, really, is this really a good idea? And that, you know, person's never addressed the topic again. They're very serious about this question. And the question is like, why is that? Why is this your red line? Killing people in faraway countries? I don't really know the answer. And I've spent a lot more time than most people pondering this. I know a lot of the people involved, or most of them, and I still don't really get it. And I feel like there's a spiritual element to this. Like, killing other people makes you feel godlike. I do think that. I mean, watch Lindsey Graham, and you can tell it's like his psyche shattered by sodomy. He just like, he's desperate to get the power that fills you when you know you're taking human life. I really think that.
Yeah.
It's the same. I just want to follow up with that, which is like Mark Levin. Like, if I were still working at Fox and if I had gone on social media and said, hey, we need to kill the head of a foreign country, and I repeated it loudly in all capital letters on a regular basis, if I said, kill this person, kill that person, I have a feeling I would have received a phone call from the powers that be at Fox and said, I'm sorry, either knock it off or you're fired. But for Mark Levin, who's on the payroll, it doesn't matter, and just amplified. I don't understand that.
Well, it's more than that too, because I mean, Mark Levin, whatever you think of him, is talentless and was never successful in television at all. Right. And Hannity got him that job on the weekends. It never rated. It doesn't rate now. Nobody watched it just because he's not good at TV. And that's, which is fine, but he's not. And everyone knows that. Professional TV people look at Mark Levin, they're like, no, you're not getting a show, sorry. And yet he has, through partly force of will, but also other forces that I'm not sure I can identify, come to define the network. Like, I don't have a TV, as you said, but I keep hearing, I'm fascinated by this question. He's apparently all over the channel all the time. That was not true when we worked there. You wouldn't put Mark Levin on your show. Why would you do that? Hannity did. Levin has some weird control over Hannity. I'd love to know more about that, but I don't. But he's on other people's shows. And I just think it's amazing. They're basically hurting their own business in order to promote this war. That's a pretty powerful statement.
Yeah.
That is a great point. He is like a pawn show. He's like a pawn shop salesman. Like, if you look at him, you'd think, oh, that guy runs a pawn shop. He doesn't have a TV show. Sorry, go ahead.
Well,
and he's angry and unpleasant and unattractive, and he's not super articulate actually or interesting. It's like, I can think of a lot of, I mean, like, you work in TV, you know what a good host is. That guy's the opposite. He's just not good. Even if I agreed with him, I'd say that.
Yeah. But why don't we look at it from the other end, too? Because Fox News, for whatever reason, is going full force into this war. Last summer, we were watching when bombs were hitting Tel Aviv, and Harris Faulkner said, Iran is doing this because they want to eradicate all Jews from the planet. And I was like, what a stupid thing to say. No context that Israel had fired first. That's their line. It's completely ignorant. But the radical left is aligned with this war, too. And I just really wonder how this happens. Now, I read Rachel Maddow's first book, Drift, and it is a condemnation of forever wars and a reminder of the human cost. Now, fast forward 10 years later, and she publishes Prequel, which is a condemnation of the anti-war movement during World War II, and she lumps in mothers like me who don't want their kids drafted with Nazis. How does that happen? I know you knew her at one time. I just really don't understand how 10 years goes by and you are warning about the dangers of endless war, and then all of a sudden you're warning about the dangers of anti-war movements. What do you think happens to someone when they gain power in the media that would switch your brain so drastically?
Tribalism. That's what that, and that's the point of whipping up tribalism, because it short circuits people's brains. I watched this with Naomi Wolf, who I love, who's like a great person, and I agree with her on everything, except this. And all of a sudden she's calling me an anti-Semite and texting me, why are you an anti-Semite? And I'm like, I actually hate anti-Semitism. I'm not an anti-Semite. Yes, you are. And it's because people get terrified that their group is going to be hurt. And, I get it. I'm not even judging it, but I'm saying this is the fruit of a long-term strategy to make people feel insecure and afraid on the basis of group identity, because they're much easier to control when they're terrified. And I saw this exact same thing when I covered black politics 30 years ago. Covered Al Sharpton, who I really liked, actually. Funny guy, but totally unqualified for anything. He's a criminal. And he would travel around with Al Sharpton, and no one in poor black neighborhoods, a lot of them are like, this guy's a total fraud. But they would never say that to like a white person, because the feeling was, he's a fraud, but we're under attack. Therefore, we have to stick together and not criticize a guy who calls himself our leader. By the way, you see this a little bit with whites, rural whites and Trump. Just being honest. I mean, I actually technically am a rural white. I'm white. I live in a rural area. I campaigned for Trump, voted for him. But we just have to be honest that tribalism, which is to say the stoking of primordial fears that my group is going to get killed by that group, makes us much more obedient to our leaders and much more likely to stick together on the basis of tribal identification, and much less interested in like reasoned argument or appeals to the common good. It's just a fact. And I think you're seeing that in part now. And I think I do.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons they're telling you that we're on the verge of pogroms.
I guess I just thought, does she have defense contracts that she would publish a book like this after what I thought Drift was quite a prescient book? I don't mean to have used that word twice now. But
no, it's appropriate.
Yeah, and now this, and I just don't get it, how someone can go so hard in the anti-war paint. I just don't understand. So you think it's not just defense contracting money? I
don't think. I would be shocked if Rachel was like tied in with Raytheon in any way, though that may change. Can I suggest another answer? I actually wrote a book about this once, about 10 years ago, that I do think that liberals have always hated war, and the sincere liberals have hated it because they don't believe in hurting people and killing the innocent. And those are the kind of liberals I'm very much on side with. But there were other liberals who didn't like the defense establishment because they thought it was not on their side. And a lot of them realized under Clinton, when he started blowing up baby milk factories and bombing the Serbs, that actually war and the war machine could be used on their behalf. And that actually, if we spend $1 trillion or $1.5 trillion on the Department of Defense, like that's a lot of power. We should probably take control of that. And it may be that Rachel Maddow sympathizes with the war machine because the modern war machine is populated by people who watch Rachel Maddow. And that's something that non-liberals don't really get. Right. That most flag officers I've run into in the U.S. military, I lived in D.C. my whole life, so everyone's rotating in and out of the Pentagon, so you run into a lot of military people, like at dinner. Not all, but most of the generals and admirals that I sat next to were like Rachel Maddow liberals. And they all had like master's degrees in something stupid from Stanford. They were dumb people. They were almost all dumb people. But they were compliant, obedient, organization type people. They were bureaucrats, and bureaucrats are liberal because they're broken inside. They seek safety in numbers. The organization's more important than the individual for all the familiar psychological motives that Ted Kaczynski so brilliantly described in his first book. They are liberal. And I think Rachel Maddow, who's smart, knows that like the war machine is on her side. That's just true. It is. It's on her side, which is why they kill so many Christians around the world. It's why they hate Putin. I mean, honestly.
Right. Yeah.
Gosh,
no, you're
that's
right.
hard to swallow.
It is hard to swallow, and it's spot on, though. I mean, we've been around these, New York City liberals, these media liberals. I want to ask you, sticking on the media question here, Tucker, before we let you go in a few minutes, is about this media blackout on a whole host of questions right now in this war. But first and top of mind for me is the number of Americans killed and the number of Americans wounded in this war. On Monday on our show on the 9th of March, we reported here, according military sources we've been speaking to, that the number of wounded was 147 Americans, and that number hadn't come out. And then the next day, Reuters had an exclusive, which I find, it's very interesting how that works, had an exclusive where they reported 140 soldiers wounded, and then the Pentagon responded and says, yes, that's accurate. And then it turns out that those wounded aren't just like, they don't have like hangnails, like they got it caught on a piece of cotton on their shirt, like traumatic brain injuries, their lives forever devastated, of course. And this is all, of course, being kept. No one was really asking the wounded question. And now we're getting like slow rolling of these numbers out about the American killed and wounded. From your sources and very, very close to the White House, are those numbers accurate? Are you hearing something different? And why do you think the media is just hiding these numbers?
Well, I think there are a couple of reasons. And the short answer is I don't know the truth. I would say the media is hesitant to push on this matter for two reasons. One, they support the war because they just support war reflexively, because they support big organizations reflexively because they're cowards and weak inside, and they realize that the enemies of the institution are their enemies. So that's number one, for the same reason Rachel Maddow supports Raytheon. The second reason is, I think, more legitimate, which is, it's people died, the families. It's like, ooh, you don't want to do anything disrespectful. There's a kind of moral blackmail when you deal with the government, as I have for like 25 years on this question, various conflicts. Like, how many people died? Like, don't you have an obligation to tell us that? Whoa, you're disrespecting the families. And part of that is just like a cover for their lying. They don't want you to know people have been injured. They don't want you to know the cost of this in dollars or in lives. But part of it is kind of real. Like, the last thing you want to do is make the families feel worse. They feel bad enough. So I do think it's just a touchy subject as to how many people have died. And by the way, the same with ground troops. So the United States, I don't think, has any intention at all ever of sending like an Iraq invasion style force into Iran. I just don't believe that's going to happen. We'd go to nukes before we did that. That's my impression. But that doesn't mean that there aren't boots on the ground. There aren't special operatives, tier 1 guys on the ground. It doesn't mean that at all. And those poor guys, some of whom, because they're in media world a lot, so much is put on their shoulders. It's like they actually don't send regular Army troops as often as they send Delta Force and various SEAL teams. Like, those guys get used a lot. I would say too much. I think it's terrible for them. It's obviously risky for them, but it's not good for them. And I wouldn't assume that they're not there. But then on the other hand, wouldn't assume that at all. On the other hand, do you really want in the middle of a war to be like, oh yeah, SEAL Team 4 is here? So I think I feel personally at a huge disadvantage. I feel much more comfortable saying, when are you going to get the Straits of Hormuz open, than I am saying, like, do we have guys on the ground on some island? Right. Even if you suspect we do. And the last point I would say is, there's so much lying and so much censorship, and some of it is on purpose, so much AI designed to deceive you and make you unsure of what you know, that like you end up thinking, I don't know anything. You read Ben Gvir got killed, or the second Ayatollah is actually dead. And, who knows?
Netanyahu's brother was killed. I mean, I guess that was going to be my next question, was about, do we know what the destruction has been like in Israel? I mean, there's been a total blackout on total blackout on Israeli attacks. What's your sense of everyday life now for the Israelis?
I don't know. I'm not quite as popular in Israel as I once was. I'm not quite as well sourced. But I do know a lot of people in the Gulf, and where it's also illegal, by the way, to share social media video of the destruction. And in those 6 Gulf monarchies, some wonderful people there. And I think it's it varies by country, but I think in some of them it's pretty tough. Pretty darn tough. The one piece of tape that got my attention that I've been thinking about for like the last 5 years is video of a missile or a missile segment about 100 yards from the Dome of the Rock in Al-Aqsa Mosque complex. And by the way, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. And I think the concern, the global concern, the concern that like our descendants will be talking about, is the destruction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex and the Dome of the Rock, the gold dome over the foundation stone in Jerusalem that's like at the center of 2 of the 3 Abrahamic faiths. If that were destroyed in this, you would have I don't even know, but nothing like that has happened in our lifetimes or in our ancestors' lifetimes. Like, that would be the beginning of a generational global war, and perhaps a nuclear exchange. I mean, that would be the end. And there are a lot of people in Israel who want that. Not a lot, maybe. I don't know the numbers, but there are certainly prominent figures in Israel who want that. And so I think the second thing the U.S. government has to do, in addition to making certain that Israel never launches nuclear weapons against anybody, the second thing they need to do is make sure that the Dome of the Rock, that mosque, is protected, not because we're Muslims or protecting Islam, but because that would end the world as we know it. So no, we're not doing that. We're not false flagging Dome of the Rock. We're also going to try to protect it from errant Iranian missiles or whatever, but that's a priority. That's my opinion. I think we should do that because I'm concerned about that.
You are politically. Can I ask you a question? Are you,
Yeah.
you-
I just wanted to tell you this little anecdote, since I know you don't worry about popularity at all. You're really immune to that kind of thing. But let me just tell you this nice anecdote is you're a Californian, I'm a Californian. I have a lot of friends that are California liberals who are now sharing videos of Ted Cruz and Mike Huckabee getting absolutely wrecked by you and saying, look at this. I can't believe I'm sharing Tucker Carlson. And my response is usually, why? What don't you like about Tucker Carlson? They don't know why. They've just been told not to like you because of the mainstream media. But look at this new generation that you are inspiring now with your commitment to honesty. So if that's a comfort to you at all, in the popularity that you've lost, you've gained many too.
Well, thank you. I grew up with the furry armpit ladies making granola in my classroom in first grade. There was a whole category of California liberals who I really liked. I mean, I made fun of them, but I always liked them. They were sweet people in their tank tops and their little God's eyes hanging on their rearview mirrors and everything. And I hope they're still around because they were fundamentally nice people.
They might be cheering you on again.
I hope so. It's true. Like they're saying, I've been red pilled by Tucker Carlson.
Yes.
I like hearing these stories of people that they've been awakened by it all. Yeah. I guess that's all we've got for you, Tucker. I don't want to take up more of your time.
Thank you, guys. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's been great to see you as well, and keep doing what you're doing, the incredible work that you're doing, and being one of those. I guess I wanted to ask you real quick before you go, because we just saw last night. You follow politics so closely, you know it better than just about anyone I know. What you saw happen with last night with Thomas Massie, Ed Gowrain down there with Donald Trump in Kentucky, and so after Trump has this rally with Gowrain, who gets up on stage and makes some really weird speech. After that, the poll numbers shifted for 15 percentage points in Massey's favor. I don't know how closely you looked at those polls or not, but I just think to me that's like a microcosm of this battle right now. What's happening in Kentucky with Congressman Massey versus this sort of war machine. How do you see it?
I see it as really sad. I mean, I was there. I was standing next to Trump at Mar-a-Lago when he won. I was with him on stage in the weeks before. I was there the next morning with all the transition guys. I mean, I really felt like I saw that all up close. I thought it was thrilling. I thought the coalition that he pulled together in last election was like a true sign of hope in American politics. People who never voted for Republicans never voted at all, voted for him, young people, black men and Hispanic guys and like just Americans all coming together, and I really liked that. And to see the neocons intentionally destroy that coalition, because ultimately it was a threat to them. Anything America First is a threat to people who demand loyalty to a foreign country. They did it on purpose. And it worked. It worked. And all of a sudden, MTG and Massey are the main enemies. Or I'm a bigger danger than, according to Ted Cruz, and any liberal. Like, what? It was all on purpose. They did it on purpose. They destroyed Trump's 2024 coalition, got him to go along with it somehow, and they just blew it up. And I hope someone rebuilds it. I hope someone rebuilds a political coalition of normal people who just want their government not to hate them and to make a good faith effort to improve their lives, recognizing it's not easy. We have differing views on how to do it, but we can at least try. It doesn't always have to be about degrading people and putting them deeper into debt and getting their daughters on OnlyFans and invading Iran. Like, that is not a program anyone really wants other than Ben Shapiro. So I would like to have a party for people who just want normal, hey, let's improve the country politics. And I hope we can have that,
Imagine that. Imagine that that's so radical. Remarkable. Oh, man. The great Tucker Carlson. Great to see you, my friend. Thank you for being
wonderful to see you both.
So generous with your time.
You
really
too.
great. Thanks, Tucker.
I love it.
Thanks,
Thank
Tucker.
you. See you guys.
All right, see you.
Hello to your family.
Yeah, give my best to your lovely family. All right, thanks, Tucker.
Thank you.
Did you know that early onset dementia and Alzheimer's are on the rise? Reports show 373% increase in diagnoses among 30 to 44-year-olds. How is that happening? 311% increase in 45 to 54-year-olds in the U.S. in recent years. When doctors treat brain diseases, they often focus on medicating the brain itself instead of actually looking at the root causes of it. Much like the body, the many brain issues trace right back to the gut microbiome. There's a direct connection and communication line between your gut and your brain. And that's where, gut bacteria influence inflammation, mood, memory, cognitive function. That's why what you eat matters so much. That's why in Korea, they live an extra 7 years. Why? Because they eat kimchi on a daily basis. They live 7 years longer than we do. Kimchi contains over 900 probiotic strains. Studies show its bioactive compounds help reduce inflammation, protect brain cells, even improve memory, cognitive function by preventing amyloid beta plaque buildup. That's why Brightcore created Kimchi One. Not a lot of Americans like the taste of kimchi, but if you can just take it in a daily capsule, you won't even notice. No taste, no smell, virtually no sodium. It's made in the USA, non-GMO. I'm a big fan of the taste of kimchi, but hey, if you're not, that's where this pill comes in, this great supplement. And right now you can get 25% off your entire order by just going to mybrightcore.com/redacted. But an even better deal, if you call them at Brightcore, you'll get 50% off and free shipping. Give them a call right now, 888-404-6312 to get 50% off. I have so many things. I just would love to be able to sit down with you for just hours and just be able to just to talk about everything that's going on in this country.
Natalie said you guys are coming to stay with us, and Natalie said you guys are coming to stay with us in March, which I'm very psyched for.
I would love that. I'm super excited about this.
Park at our house. Bring all the
kids. Bring the kids and bring the puppy. And I mean, I don't know how you've managed to do it. Right now, when you look at, there's so many different directions that I have in my brain that I want to talk to you about. I mean, when you look right now at President Trump and where things are going with this country, we've got about 50 or so odd days until he becomes president of the United States. Where do you think his blind spots are right now? Obviously, you've been around him. You know that he has people's ear. People come up to him. And something that Colonel Douglas McGregor has said to me a couple of times is that very often it's maybe the last people in the room who've had incredible influence over President Trump. What do you think he's learned from 2016 and in his presidency until now that you've been able to spend so much time with him?
I think he's learned a bunch. He's learned the depth of the corruption of the systems that run the country, of the institutions that we live under, the Department of Justice, the intel world. He made Tulsi Gabbard director of national intelligence. It's just really an amazing fact. It's amazing. Bobby Kennedy at HHS, incredible. Dr. Oz at CMS. Marty McCary, I think, at FDA. He put reformers, like real reformers, not kidding around reformers, in key positions. So that's a sign of what he often says, which is the system is corrupt. Drain the swamp is a synonym for the system is corrupt. He knows that. Second thing, I think he understands, look how quickly they've made some of these appointments. Well, all of them. It's been 2 weeks and they've got almost every cabinet position. Treasury's still open. There may be another, possibly. Veterans Affairs, I'm losing track, but in general, they filled every position in 2 weeks. And third and most important, I think he has learned the lesson a lot of us learn over time, which is you can't trust anyone who hasn't been humiliated in public, unless someone's really been through it, really been through it, been fired from his job, accused of a crime, and stayed true to what he believes, hasn't collapsed inside and become Michael Cohen. It's only people like that you can really trust under pressure. And I certainly feel that way in my life, which is why when I got fired from my last job, the people I brought with me are the people who came with me, because they've been through all this stuff.
Right.
And I knew who they were. It's easy to be, a great person if there's no pressure applied to you. But when things start to fall apart, people move in directions you can't anticipate. So you want tough people. Courage is the indispensable requirement, I think, for leadership. It's it's easy to say or even to believe the right things, but it's harder to carry them out under fire. And so I do think he's appointed people who've been through it. Tulsi Gabbard has been through it. Bobby has been through it. Matt Gaetz, whatever you think, has been through it. Matt Gaetz got accused of child sex trafficking by the Department of Justice, which then never charged him for child sex trafficking. Which, if you think about it, people need to go to doing that. How would you like it if I'm like, the DOJ announced today that Clayton Morris is, responsible for genocide in Central Africa. Okay. Well, prove it. And then you get fired from your job and all your neighbors hate you and your wife divorces you or whatever. Like your world falls apart.
Right.
And then DOJ is like, well, actually, we're not charging him for genocide in Central Africa. It's like the people who did that to you should be punished for it. And they did that to Matt Gaetz. If he's a child sex trafficker, prove it in court, bitch. And if he's not, you're committing a crime by saying he is. So it's super simple. So I do think, and I believe this, that Trump picked Gaetz and people like Gaetz because he knows who they are and they know who they are because they've been forced to learn.
Right. I think you're right about that. And I think it's so infuriating to hear, to have any of this sort of hidden from us. So even when Speaker Johnson said, we have an investigation, we have a report on Matt Gaetz, we're not going to release it to the public. No, I think that time is over. Release all of it. Release everything now. Put it out here for all of us to see it. Be transparent. You don't get to sort of pick and choose this anymore, and so you're playing their games. I mean, transparency. Put it out in the sun. Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday said, put it out in the sunlight. Everything. The Epstein files, the tapes, everything. Put it out there. Let us judge.
That's exactly right. And, Bobby Kennedy, and I'm sorry to keep going back to Bobby Kennedy. I've spent a lot of time with him in the last 6 months. Bobby Kennedy, I think, is the perfect example of this. Bobby Kennedy's led quite a varied life with ups and downs and with behavior he's not proud of, and it's well known. And the people who oppose rooting out corruption have tried to blackmail him many, many times on the basis of that, publicly and privately. And he has the same line every time, which is, I've got so many skeletons in my closet. If they could all vote, I'd be elected king. He just says, they're like, yeah, if you're accusing me of something bad, I'm sure it's true, but I still think what I think. And here's what I believe. And why don't you rebut those arguments? No one ever wants to. They want to just get you off the stage by attacking you personally. But the point of keeping all of this stuff secret is to use it as leverage against the people on whom it's collected, obviously. It's why the intel agencies have access to, the back end of the porn sites, because they know what people are watching, and they may have video and who knows what they have, but they definitely have access to back end of porn sites. And why? And the answer, of course, is to blackmail people. That is the answer. And they do. And it's not just intel agencies who do that. So it's other politicians. It's the media to some extent. Knowing secrets about people gives you power over them. And so my view just in general is I'm against secrets. If I'm keeping a secret from my wife, it's probably not good. It's probably not. I'm not.
Right.
You know what I mean? Nobody wants his secrets revealed. But big picture, if you live in a society with a lot of secrets, you live in a society in which criminal behavior is rampant, and we do. So, declassify it all. And let's start with 9/11. There's absolutely no reason that 23 years later, those files should be classified. Oh, shut up, conspiracy theorists. Well, they're abetting conspiracies. They're actually causing people to go crazy and come up with theories for what happened. They know the answer. And by they, I mean the federal government. Just release it. And same with UAPs, same with the Kennedy assassination, same with everything. Unless you're planning a Normandy invasion on Sunday, in which case you can wait till Monday to tell me about it. You have no legal or moral right to keep that from me. It's my government. I pay for it. You're doing it in my name. I own the government. I'm an equity shareholder in this government, and so are you. And so the fact that the public stands for this and allows secrecy to be used as a tool of control, which it is a lot, and I've seen it, is shocking to me. People should say, no, you cannot classify 1 billion federal documents. On what grounds? Who gave you the right to do that? Just because you're in the job that determines classification doesn't give you the right to hide the truth from the public who own that information. So yeah, I'm with MTG. If we're going to release, and of course they're going to leak it as they leak everything. Well, let's leak all the ethics committee reports, and then the people involved can tell you whether or not that's true, and they can defend themselves. And if there's countervailing evidence, we can see it. And just like sunlight, that's the answer. Sunlight. Stop lying. No more lying. Lying is bad. Lying corrodes. It corrupts all of us. We're all participating in a system based on lies, and that degrades us. It diminishes us.
Something you've said really stays with me, and I think about it often as we look at the independent media journalism landscape, because they'll try to couch it all right as this is for your safety, this is for your freedom, We're going to pretend that, Monty is over here because the Normandy invasion is going to happen up near Calais and not down here at Normandy Beach. So you need to rally around it because it's all about protecting our freedoms and our democracy. And we kind of constantly hear this bandied about. But something you said to me, not said to me, but you've said, I think, publicly a couple of times after you left your last job, it's about lying by omission. And I think about that often doing the show that we do, because it's very easy to lie by omission, to build a show and to leave out key things because it makes you uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Or because you're receiving money from some source or whatever. So it's very nefarious. I mean, because you can flip on legacy media today and you can say, oh, that they're in the tank for the Democrats. They're in the tank for conservatives and Trump. But there's always like 30% of the things they're missing. They're just not saying it for some reason. And you wonder, and that to me is a deep state. Is it deep state money? How many of the, to me, it's always follow the money. But what do you make of that? Because I see it now happening in alternative media. Like forget the cable box, forget Fox News, forget MSNBC, forget CNN and lying by omission or whatever. But now it's happening in alternative media, like the independent media, and it's I think it's creeping in there and it's bothering me. I don't know if you see it or you're aware of it or what you think.
I think I know what you mean. I mean, well, certainly it's just a feature of the human experience. I've wrestled with it personally because, if I'm being honest, and I always want to be honest, you say things you believe are true. That's your obligation, or well, your obligation, let me reverse it, is not to ever say anything you know to be untrue, not to lie. Okay.
Right.
On the other hand, are you under any kind of obligation to say everything you believe is true? No. I mean, I have thoughts about, things that are embarrassing or not relevant to anything. I could be completely wrong, or,
Right.
He's gained a lot of weight. Probably not going to share that. They're hurtful for no good purpose.
Then you turn into Kramer from Seinfeld, where you just walk into a room
exactly
and you're, man,
right.
You need a nose job. Like
Exactly. It's totally right. So you don't want to be that person. You don't want to cause harm for no reason. You want to be constructive and kind. On the other hand, there are also some facts of American life that are very obvious, that are never spoken out loud, partly because, people seek to be polite and not to hurt other people without cause, and partly because people are afraid to say the most obvious things. And that's certainly true in our political realm. And so there are plenty of things that I believe to be true that I don't say, either because they're hurtful, I'm not sure they're right, or they're just so overwhelming that it's like, okay, I don't really know quite what to do about that. So it might be better just to state affirmatively what you would like your country to be, which is sovereign, capable of acting in its own interest. That's really important. Honest. You'd want a government that just says what it's doing and why it's doing it, tells you the truth as a matter of law. Like, you're not allowed to lie to the public. Why should you be allowed to lie? It's illegal to lie to a federal agent, as everyone knows. And many of my friends have found out the hard way. But it is not illegal for them to lie to you. So it's like, who came up with that system? Anyway, these are our employees, but they can lie to us. If I catch my housekeeper lying, if I catch her in my safe and she won't say what she's doing there, she's out. But in the federal system, it's like, you can catch the feds in your safe. They don't have no obligation to tell you why they're there. And there's nothing you can do about it. In fact, if you complain, they'll put you in jail. So clearly, we've got a screwed up system. But yeah, there's a lot that's unsaid. And there are also, of course, taboos. And we grew up in a society that was governed much more than we realized by taboos, things you just don't say. And both of us are from, basically Anglo backgrounds, which is a culture that doesn't say everything out loud already. So, it's a process of learning to articulate things you've taught not to articulate, figuring out, what's a helpful way to say something, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, just to bottom line it, there are huge facts, determinative facts about American life and politics that are never said out loud. That is absolutely right. Sorry.
I think some of the people that are speaking out about it are getting, they're being destroyed for speaking out about it, and you're seeing that, and it's really disturbing. And yeah, I guess it kind of as I think about the future of journalism, what does it mean for independent journalism? Obviously, journalism is very important to you. How do you see it evolving, changing, given the fact that this past election cycle, people didn't turn on their cable box. CNN's ratings are verifiably in the toilet. Done. Layoffs, MSNBC, no one's watching them. They were on the air this week crying, basically, asking how they can regain relevancy up against the independent media now and social media influencers. And of course, it's condescending, right? This idea that people are only watching 20-second sound bites is just total bullshit. People are watching your 2-hour shows as one of the most popular shows in America. They're watching Joe Rogan's 3-hour shows as one of the most popular programs in the world, in world history. And so MSNBC gets up there and denigrates people that they say they're watching 20-second clips and that's all they're doing. And how do they regain relevancy and all of these things. But where do you see journalism going? Elon Musk said, you are the media now after Election Day. How do you think it's going to change and evolve over the next few years? How important is it for citizen journalists?
Well, I would just start by saying there's nothing more corrupt than what we have. So I'm glad that it's going away. There's nothing shallower than cable news. Life in it. So for them to say, the public is reaching conclusions we disagree with because they're not watching long and they're getting all their news from TikTok or something. I just want to restate, there's nothing shallower, dumber, more repetitive, more controlled, less informative than cable news. I think I can say that with authority. So can you. So if they're claiming that the other guys are just not up to their level of journalism or rectitude, that, it's just dogs barking. It means nothing to me. Obviously, we're entering a much freer, more open period. Elon Musk deserves 100% of the credit for that because he has this platform at scale, the only one at scale that's open. Joe Rogan deserves the credit for creating an entire new genre, podcasting, from which I'm benefiting. So I'm grateful to Joe Rogan, and I mean that. Plus, I love Joe Rogan anyway. But he did that single-handedly. So, and I guess we're both beneficiaries of it. He created this thing it didn't exist before. It's an amazing thing. And if the world were fair, then, everyone in the media would be tipping a hat to him. Did you invent the newspaper? Did you invent radio? Did you invent television? I don't think so. Joe Rogan essentially invented podcasting. He made it clear to everybody else that this could both have an effect and be a real business. Who thought that would be true? He proved it. Here are my concerns. I don't have too many concerns. Here's something that annoys me. If there's a lesson of what happened to television and newspapers, print and legacy media, they died because they were corrupt. The business model changed, et cetera, et cetera. There are ways they won't evolve. The people who work at NBC News will not have careers in journalism 10 years from now. And the reason they won't is not because of technology. It's because they have no credibility because they're corrupt. They're liars. So that's really the lesson. Corruption kills you, especially in a business predicated on trust, which is the media. Don't emulate that. Don't be corrupt. And, there are people on social media, influencers on both sides, and we're learning more about it now, who took money in order to endorse certain people or ideas. That's corrupt. Look, I take advertising. I think you do too. It's okay to say, I'm being paid to promote this product. And by the way, I like the product or whatever you say, but it's very clear you're being paid to promote something. Secretly promoting things for money is, maybe you make, a decent living doing that. But over time, it devalues your currency and makes people not believe you, not trust you. Why would they? And there was some of that in this last cycle. And I hope the people who did it will just admit that they did it and be very open about it. And I hope it's not like a story we find out about in 5 years and all of a sudden, people don't trust us anymore as a result of the behavior of a few people. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And that's what I worry about for independent media. We are, as you know, especially in the right, we're under enormous pressure already from the censors. If you're broadcasting on YouTube, you're already, up against it. we're every day in our live stream, I see some people saying we don't even receive notifications when you go live. YouTube doesn't tell us you're going live. You're suppressed. You're suppressed. You're suppressed. So we know we are. We're already up against it, and now you're gonna layer on this additional level of like corruption, and you're gonna. I don't want to say it's corrupt. It's just immoral, really, to say that you're I love Kamala Harris. I love Kamala Harris, and you guys got to go out and vote for her. And I'm not going to tell my audience that I received, tens of thousands of dollars from her, or the same on the Trump side. That you're not going to say that.
And I don't know. By the way, I don't know how widespread that is, but if even the suspicion arises that people are not telling the truth because they're being paid to lie. I think that's an incredibly cruel. I know because I just exited 30 years in that business. That's very corrosive. So I hope that is not happening in any widespread way, and I hope that it ends, because I mean, more than anything, I would much rather be wrong. I have been wrong a million times, including about big things, but I don't want to be dishonest, and I don't want to be seen as dishonest. Both for my own reasons of integrity, but also because that, like, why would anyone watch you if you're a liar? Like, no one wants to watch a liar. It's not worth your time. That's why I stopped reading the New York Times. I don't want it in my head. I don't know what's a lie and what's not. Just get away from me. And I think most people feel that way.
And I think it's also troubling on the other side, to be fair, is if we find out, and again, I haven't even heard this story, and if this is, you know a lot more than I do, I will say that 100%, and your sources are phenomenal, so I will say that. But if we find out that like, the RNC or somebody from some super PAC related to Trump was paying off like conservative YouTubers or Rumble people or something like that, I think that would be deeply disturbing on that side too, not just on the person who accepted the money, but it would raise a lot of questions for me on the backside, I guess. I'd have to really wrestle with that and sit with and think with that, because my immediate reaction is I'd be bothered by it, but maybe not. Like if I sat with it for a while, I'd be like, well, how maybe is it any different than some other television ad, But I don't know. I think I would be bothered by it. I think I'm bothered by it.
And
That's just my
I have
gut
no
reaction.
evidence that has happened at all. But I just think it's important to keep in mind that purity of spirit is detectable by others. People know who's being honest, who's saying something because I really believe this. That's why I'm saying it. And I think people can feel that. And don't take a dark path. Like, there's enough money in this country. You don't need to destroy yourself and your credibility for 50 grand. Like, that's not a good trade for you or anyone else, I don't think.
Can I ask you an uncomfortable question?
Oh, I love that. I specialize in those, Clayton.
You specialize in it. Well, we look at Trump's cabinet coming together.
Yep.
You know a lot of these people very, very well.
Yep.
And I have to say, I'll just put it out there first for me. If I'm going to ask you a tough question, I'll put myself out there. I've said it multiple times here on the show over the past few weeks. Like, I was stunned that Mike Pompeo was even in like the circle. So I know from my own reporting that there were some people close to Trump that made that not happen. And if I believe you might have been one of those people. So if that's the case, that you talked to Trump into not hiring a criminal for his own cabinet, I'm excited about that. First of all, did you have any influence of that whatsoever? And then also, are there any other people on his cabinet that maybe made you cringe?
Well, on the question of Pompeo, I would say two things. One, I have no idea if I had influence or not. I think Mike Pompeo is a criminal. I've said that many, many times. He plotted the murder of someone who'd not even been charged with a crime, which federal appointees are not allowed to do. You can't kill people because they embarrass you. So that's criminal behavior. He's never been charged for it. He threatened to sue me for saying that. I will say once again, please do. I would enjoy the discovery portion of that exercise.
I would love the discovery of that. That would be an amazing.
It would be amazing, and I would look forward to it. So that's the first thing. I have no idea if I had influence. We all overstate our own influence. So I always assume I have very little influence, but that's what I wanted. So I was grateful that it happened. Second, I don't even know, in point of fact, if Pompeo was really in the running or not. I think it's possible. Pompeo is a international businessman of some kind, not clear what kind. But, if you're doing business abroad, you want to be talked about as a potential Secretary of Defense, because it's helpful for your business. So I have no idea. I really don't know the degree to which he was ginning that up in order to help his business, it's unknown and probably unknowable, but he's not. Yeah, look, it's not even about the people. I am very concerned that the people who have hated Trump for 8 years and run out of ways to destroy him, indicting him, well, first calling him a racist, spying on him with the federal intel agencies, sicking the FBI on him, trying to put him in prison, then trying to kill him at least twice, probably more, actually, but at least twice. And that those people, out of options, have decided the only way to stop Trump and the disclosure that a Trump administration will bring, once again, disclosure is what they fear, having their crimes revealed, that the only way to stop Trump is with a world war. And so I've been pretty fixated on that for months, probably more than a year. I've just thought a lot about it, and I know a lot of the people involved, and they're very, very, very focused on war. Permanent Washington doesn't care about domestic policy, in case your viewers, I'm sure, know this, but just want to restate it. They don't care about domestic policy. They don't care about fixing the country, closing the borders, ending the drug crisis, getting the cartels out of, the entire Southwest. They don't care about that. What they care about is exercising power abroad, killing people because it makes them feel like God, and making money. And that's where the money is, trillions of dollars. So they care about foreign policy. And I have been concerned and remain concerned that that group of people, which is basically everyone in DC in both parties, wants Trump to take the country to war, either against Russia or, far more likely, Iran. And I think what people outside, I don't know how to the degree to which this is understood, but I just will say it. A war with Iran is a world war. This is not 2002. Iran is now part of a coalition that includes the biggest economies in the world and the largest militaries in the world. So a war with Iran means a war in effect, or, by proxy, but still a war with Russia, China, Turkey, and a lot of the rest of the world. So that's a world war. It's not just as simple as we're going to take out their nuclear facilities. Okay. How are you going to do that? And how are you going to ensure that doesn't destroy the United States in the process? And of course, they don't care whether it destroys the United States. That's the actual answer. They don't care. And if they cared, they would pause and think about it. But anyway, I don't want to be bitter about it. But to me, it's really simple. Anybody who would even consider having a war with Russia or Iran should not be in any position of power at all in this administration or any other administration. It's super simple. And I think especially Ukraine is so obvious. Now, there is some debate on Iran, and I'm not endorsing Iran. I'm not a Shiite. But there's really no debate at this point about the debacle that has been Ukraine. Ukraine's not going to win. It's just completely destroyed Ukraine. It hasn't crushed Russia. It's really hurt the United States. So anyone who can't say that out loud should not have a job in the federal bureaucracy. So that's my litmus test. It's not about people or personality. Of course, I know them all, as I know you do too, and I like a lot of them. I even like some of the guys I disagree with. One in particular I like very much. Nice guy, good guy. But it's a simple, practical test for whether or not you should wield power. Do you have the requisite wisdom to lead my country? And if you're still defending the war in Ukraine, you do not have the requisite wisdom to lead my country. That's my opinion.
That's a good litmus test. We should start there. That's like the basic. That's like the kindergarten test. Do you support this?
Yes!
And you
exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
It's amazing because you even have. I was stunned by something top Ukrainian commander Zaluzhny just said this week. I mean, he said he was in one of his master's homes in the UK, in Britain, where he was meeting with Ukrainian troops, of course, who are being trained there in the UK. And he told the troops there that there's almost no hope for your survival, and that you need to go to the front lines basically knowing you're going to die. And I mean, that's quite a prep talk. And I mean, so for this like vicious proxy war, kill or be killed. And this is the truth of it. Over 1 million Ukrainians dead now, or permanently maimed, an entire generation of young men wiped out, a country destroyed. And they're still trying to sell this thing. And then, of course, over the past few days, we've seen the madness that is unfolding in the White House, allowing long-range missiles to be used from Ukraine at NATO's direction. Make no mistake, anyone watching this knows that Ukrainians don't even know how to use these missiles. It's NATO that's doing it, of course, and attacking inside of Russia. And then with add on top of that, the Biden administration now has okayed anti-personnel mines to be used, something they've long said absolutely we won't use. These are basically a lot of like the same pedal mines that are thrown into the ground in Donetsk and the Donbass region. And children go to the playgrounds and they find these little pedal mines that look like leaves. They pick them up and their arms are blown off or they're killed. And the Biden administration was absolutely against this. This was their stance. And now suddenly, within the past week, all of this has changed. So who the hell is running the White House? I mean, you've got, again, I know you're humble about this, but you've got amazing sources there. Like, Biden is not, who is running the White House? Like, who is our de facto president? Is it Antony Blinken right now? Is it Jake Sullivan? Who is doing this?
Well, if you'd asked me yesterday morning, I would have said Tony Blinken, who's been running it since the beginning. But now I would say Satan, because I really think that you've got, dark forces in charge. I mean, there's no justification for using anti-personnel mines in this conflict, which can't hope to be solved with anti-personnel mines resolved in any way. The only effect of that move is to kill innocents, period. That's it. That's the only effect. And they know that. And so they're doing it anyway, because killing is the point. So it's evil. I think we should say that. I don't think it's a matter of defending democracy. The president of Ukraine is not elected. He's a dictator. He literally passed his term and kept serving. He's a dictator. And that country's shut down a Christian denomination, put priests in jail. Like, how many more markers of dictatorship do you need to call it what it is, which is totalitarian? So everything about it is horrifying. I'm so glad that you mentioned what's happening in the UK and France. There's the complicity of Western European countries in this. Really, I hope books are written about it. But there's something about a dying empire, collapsing demographically, totally pointless finance-based economy, no self-respect at all, nihilism rising. There's something about that mix, the final days of a dying civilization, that causes it to lash out in this kind of orgy of killing for its own sake. It's really the darkest thing I could. It's like you imagine Rome collapsing and the Vandals toppling buildings and having orgies in the streets and all that stuff. Really, it's the end of an empire is more like a kind of suicide, a kind of murder-suicide, where the formerly great power kills itself and then takes a lot of people out as it does. It's like more horrifying than I ever thought. Reading about the end of Rome. And I think it's probably pretty consistent over time. I mean, this is what partition was in India. The Second World War ends, Britain, quote, wins, but really they've lost and they have to give up India, and which they've had for 300 years. And rather than figure out a sort of good way to do it, they just like pull out basically in one day and allow this massive carnage, between Indians, between Sikhs and Muslims and Hindus in India, in which hundreds of thousands of people died. That did not need to happen. Why did the British do that? Because there's something about the end of something great that's always ugly and vicious and violent, hurtful to those around it. There's like deep stuff going on here that I don't, trust me, I do not pretend to understand all of this stuff, but like the behavior of France and particularly Great Britain, which itself has become totalitarian, where lots of Britons, native-born Britons, are in prison for posting social media opinions, and they're in jail for that. Like, that's not a free country. Right. It's a totalitarian country. Same with Canada. Same with New Zealand. Same with Australia. It's like, what the hell is going on? It'll be hundreds of years before some wise person can assess what happened to the English-speaking world, 20 years into the 21st century. But all at once, they decided to kill themselves and a lot of other people on the way out. It's really amazing.
It's easy to say, oh, it's the globalists, and it's part of this globalist agenda. They want to get rid of nation states, right? They want to devalue the U.S. dollar and U.S. currency to create a global currency. They don't want boundaries. They don't want borders. They don't want massive population either. And I think about that often, and I have to kind of pull myself back from that cliff a little bit. But then I keep walking up to the cliff because I keep seeing signs that that's true. and it's deeply, deeply disturbing. And you see what's happening with Trump right now, and these dark forces that are surrounding him. I think you tweeted the other day, I think you said something like, the prayers of good people got Donald Trump elected 2 weeks ago. Wars with Russia and Iran are the counterattack. And I know you don't post a lot on X. Like when you do,
Never.
Yeah, I mean, but it's very thoughtful and it's for a purpose, right? So when I saw that, I just shook my head thinking, my God, well, if this is the counterattack, who's the counterattack from? I mean, this is some dark force that's really trying to undermine this Trump administration, right? I mean, and it's so evil. I mean, have you ever seen an administration like this where leaving office, you try to drag the next administration into a world war? I mean, I get what the Clintons did. Leaving office, they removed the W's from the keyboards for George W. Bush. Like, like
I remember that.
This is totally different.
Well, I'm hardly a theologian. I mean, I'm the opposite of a theologian. I don't understand really anything about theology and really don't care to. But I just have noticed through years of observation that there is a kind of dualism isn't exactly the right word, but there is a war in the unseen world between light and darkness, good and bad. It's been described by every civilization since the beginning of time, so I think we can assume it's real. And you do see that, expressions of good, manifestations of good are sometimes followed, and vice versa, by outbursts of evil. And I don't think there's any other way to read that. And by counterattack in that tweet, which I wrote this morning, I don't have my Twitter password, so I sent it to my office and said, please tweet this. Thought of it in my sauna this morning, but I was just brooding on it and saying prayers about it. And I was like, I think Trump, I don't know that Trump's like a super faithful Christian or anything, but I know a lot of very faithful Christians prayed for Trump. And I think it had an effect. I think it was the determinative effect. I really believe that. And the counterattack is promoting war for its own sake without any promise of any kind of meaningful victory. Truly war for the sake of killing people, totally unadorned. No one's even pretending that we're going to get democracy or something if these missiles kill Putin. I mean, there's no argument even. It's like, no, we're killing because we can. That is the definition of evil. And if I could just say one thing that does distress me about American society is that not enough time has been spent thinking about how violence is bad. Violence is bad. It just is. I'm sorry. And a lot of people that I like, I've worked with, have defended violence over the years. And I think self-defense is legitimate. But killing people for the sake of killing them because you don't like them or you think they represent something bad, that's evil. I just want to be clear. Violence is bad. And by the way, if you're a Christian, it's not allowed. It's super obvious you don't need to be a theologian to glean that from the New Testament. You're not allowed to do that. Jesus is being hauled away to be tortured to death on false charges. And, one of his guys raises a sword against one of the people carrying him away, dragging him off to get tortured to death. And Jesus scolds the man with the sword, who's doing it on his behalf, says, put that away. And so we are not allowed to commit violence against people, except I would argue maybe under self-defense, in a self-defense scenario. But certainly not so we can feel powerful or because we're annoyed or because we don't like a certain president or something. It's nuts. And because not enough people say that, it goes unquestioned. But it is bad. And I've seen a lot of violence, a lot. And I don't know, probably more than Toria Nuland has seen. So I think people who've seen it are not quite as enthusiastic about it. I mean, I was never in the military, but I've been around that stuff when people get hurt. And it's like, no, this is not good at all. And anyone who thinks it's good is a freak. And I just, for the remainder of however long I have on this earth, I'm going to keep saying that because I believe that's true.
Like CNN last week when they hauled out Tammy Duckworth to talk about the virtues of putting women in combat. Like, I don't think that's the flex you thought it is. When all of Tammy Duckworth's limbs have been destroyed as a result of combat, and CNN's like, see, women can. This is why we want to send women to be maimed.
Did they really? Did they really do that?
Oh,
they really did that?
I couldn't believe it. Like, that was the argument
See,
against.
I don't think.
I don't know who said it. I think it was Matt Gaetz said women should not be in combat. I think it was a response to Matt Gaetz saying, look, we should be protecting. I've said, and I tweeted out, I said, we should be protecting our women, not sending them to the front lines of these wars. And CNN trotted Tammy Duckworth out to say, see, this is why you should. It was unbelievable.
It is unbelievable, and I agree with. I think what you said is the truest thing. It's not that women aren't brave or capable. Of course, they're brave. It's like I've got a whole
Right.
business. It's, women are into. I mean, I have 3 daughters. I couldn't be more for women. I couldn't respect their talents more. But my obligation as a man is to protect the women in my life. That's why I'm here. And if we have a country, then the whole purpose of the military is to prevent our women from being killed and raped. That's the only reason we have a military. And so if instead we're asking women to fight our wars for us, that's grotesque and dishonorable. And so it's not a question of women's rights. It's a question of men's obligations as men, as protectors and providers. That's our job. Now, I know we're living in a period where we can pretend that's not our job, and your wife's got a job at Citibank and she's a provider or whatever. But, this is just a moment in time. This is just a spot on a continuum. And that is not the rule. It's biology doesn't suggest that that's true. It's not real. And, over time, people will look back on this and say, boy, those people talked themselves into some seriously destructive nonsense. But most destructive of all is the idea that, I'm going to sit back and let the women in my house fight a war. Are you joking? If I have a home invasion in my house, do I say to my wife, you know what? I got the last one. Will you repel the invaders? You know what I mean? She would never speak to me again because she would know that I've let her down in, her moment of need and shirked my most basic duty, like the most basic duty that you have as a man. So I find it repulsive, actually, and I feel very angry and judgmental about it. And they've reframed it as this feminist issue, just like go work yourself to death at a bank and never have children. That's liberation. Like they sell people on these ideas that hurt them, that deny them the things they want most and that give them the greatest joy. They deny themselves those things so they can work for Larry Fink. And then they convince themselves, or they are convinced by the propaganda machine, that that's somehow victory or something. Like, I'm winning. Do you think Tammy Duckworth gets in bed and is like, I have no legs? Like, this is really kind of the apogee of feminism. Like, I did my part for women. I mean, maybe she thinks that. I feel sorry for her. I just want to be clear. I'm not attacking Tammy Duckworth. She is a victim of a disgusting system that exploits and hurts women and sells it to them as liberation. And she's maybe dumb enough to believe it. I hope not.
There was a piece. I'll get you out of here in a second here because I know you got to run.
Whoa, you spun me up, Clayton.
Well, there was a piece last week, and Natalie and I were talking about it, and it was about there's an entire generation now of grandparents who are like, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, and it's like the missing generation. So all these grandparents are just sad. They're all sad that their kids just opted to not have children, and so these grandparents walk past playgrounds and they look at these little grandchildren there. They think, oh, my kids just. They wanted to work. They wanted to work for Citibank. They wanted to, that was I don't think they couched it as this, it was a feminist movement, but you and I have seen it. You see it, and the push and, the way that we've pushed people, women specifically, is they should be working up until, into their 40s, when they can have dangerous pregnancies. If they're lucky, they can get pregnant. But it's deeply disturbing, and I think you're seeing that in the birth gap in the United States right now too. Too few children being born to Americans. It's deeply sad. It's really sad. I felt bad for these grandparents. It's really upsetting.
It's so funny. When I was a kid, we learned 2 things. One, that slavery and serfdom were bad. The idea that, the rich white people would just sit back in leisure and let brown people do all the work for them. Now I'm learning it's racist to be against that. And and the second thing I learned was that only truly retrograde barbaric civilizations, like under feudalism, for example, in Europe, would allow pregnant women to just like give birth in the field. It's like,
right.
Now we have, the most evolved. Apple is like, no, freeze your eggs.
Right.
I'll fly you to another state for an abortion. It's like, really, which exploits women more? Again, the amount of slavery that's sold to us as liberation just absolutely blows my mind. If people could just like pause for a second, turn off the device, and think clearly, they'd be like, wait a second. No, Apple is not my friend. Google is not my friend. BlackRock is not. These are my enemies. These are the enemies of human flourishing. They're the enemies of the things that my heart desires. And the whole system is set up to make a small number of people really rich. And yet, last thing I'll say, Antifa, which was, of course, laid dormant during the entire 4 years of Biden because they are the youth wing of the Democratic Party. Maybe they'll be mobilized again. but they were always like, we're so radical, we're Antifa. And I always thought to myself, if you're really radical, why are you never mentioning the fact that credit card companies are charging 20% interest? They're always radical, like we hate white people, or we hate any group that's not voting for the Democratic Party. They hate whites because they're not voting Democrat. That's why they hate whites. Now they're going to hate Hispanics because Hispanics aren't either. I hope Hispanics are ready to be denounced. But they never said a word about the actual power in this country, and the banks are at the very top of that pyramid. The people who live off the interest that you pay, that enslaves you. No one ever mentioned that. The radicals never mentioned that. Not one time. So, I would just hope the next generation of radicals takes aim at the actual power structures, at the actual tools of oppression, which are not racial, they're economic. I just really hope that, because that would be a nice conversation to have.
I'll get you out of here on this, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this, because back in the day when you and I were sitting there on Fox and Friends couch and talking for 4 hours a day in commercial breaks and having coffee, you and I would often talk about UFOs, UAPs, and all of this stuff. And I was a crazy person, of course, so but you had this hearing, of course, the other day, and we're past the point. Yes, aliens exist, whatever. We have reverse engineered their craft. We have these materials. We know this now. That's on the congressional record. We have this stuff. Let's move the conversation beyond that. I want to ask you about 0 point energy and these technologies that I think this government has in their possession. I think it's verifiable that instantaneous travel, unbelievable, spontaneous healing. I've spoken to sources who've watched it happen, regrowing limbs, elimination of cancer. Instantaneous travel. I think it's one of the greatest cover-ups in human history that we don't have access to this technology. Are you hopeful at all that these members of Congress, Nancy Mace and others, are going to be able to, Timber Shed and others, are going to be able to pull this out of these deep programs and release it? When you're in the smoky filled rooms, what are you hearing about this?
Well, no, I'm not at all hopeful. Hopeful. I'm not at all confident. One of the members, I don't want to betray secrets, but and I think this is correct, the members of Congress you just mentioned, I won't say which, pushed hard on the UAP Disclosure Act of 2022, which has never kind of been enacted, and as a result was primaried by his own party, which is the kind of maximum punishment in electoral politics. So there is a massive, we cannot overstate the effort in place to prevent disclosure, and the question really is why. And so these technologies clearly exist. It's not clear to me who possesses them. I'm pretty sure no one's profiting off of them. So, you can construct all kinds of explanations for why. But, everyone I've known, which is every president who's been really read into this stuff, is unwilling to disclose what he learned. Right. And you have to ask, why is that? So I think the truth is, and I haven't gotten to the truth, but I've gotten close enough that I'm like, ooh. I think it's very, very disruptive, way disruptive. It's not just that Lockheed is making a lot of money on anti-gravity technology, or we've been visited by people from their planet or whatever. I think there's more there. There is more there. So, and I'm not, exactly sure. I'm not going to speculate, but I think it's a big deal. I think it's a bigger deal than we often allow for it being. Right. Obviously, this has been going on for 80 years. So.
Yeah, I could literally, with this technology, not have to go to the airport, wait 6 hours, take my family with luggage. I could be at your house, and have dinner with you right now. And it's to me, it's just a massive crime that we're allowing cancer.
But can I ask you a question? So there's this process of recovering of these craft, whatever they are, right? And the so-called biologics that reside within, supposedly. And I'm sure you're aware of this. So how exactly are there so many crashed UAPs? What is that? They have the technology to, travel 150 knots underwater, but they somehow crash a lot. It doesn't kind of make any sense. They just have bad GPS or something. It's they possess technology that defies the laws of physics, but they crash. So I just don't think that makes any sense. And what I believe is true is that, these recoveries have been the result of the summoning of these craft. And that's the word that was relayed to me, the summoning of these craft. So, if you're summoning, what does that even mean? You're talking about a phenomenon that exists in the spiritual realm. I mean, that's more like a seance than a science expedition, right?
Right.
Doesn't make it any less real, by the way, but it changes the category.
Right, when we can't wrap our brains around interdimensionality, right? And so I think that's when you start to get into that. It's mind bending to think about. We think, oh, they're just coming from off world, or are they literally right here interdimensionally, or they've been here for thousands of years in our oceans? And there's been quite a bit of people I've spoken to have told me about early craft that they were recovering in 1940s. Apparently, were wildly affected by and deeply disrupted by radar. And it was causing all sorts of problems with these craft, and the initial craft that they had recovered were as a result of radar interfering with their with the way they were traveling. I've also heard GPS over the years. But I've also heard sources tell me that think about all of the test, craft and probes and things that we launch on a regular basis that crash, that they are somehow omnipotent, that they wouldn't crash is laughable as well. They're going to have craft that crash. It's just a matter of, it's just physics. It's going to happen at some point. So I don't know. I'm hopeful that in my lifetime we'll get something where we get the government to say, all those cars you've been driving for so long, yes, we've had the technology for 100 years that we can travel instantaneously, and we'd like to now present it to you. And sorry, all of the people that make billions of dollars a year, you're out of a job. But it's too disruptive, I think, at this point. Anyway,
it is disruptive. And the last thing I'll say is we just had, as you pointed out, congressional hearings on this under oath, and nobody noticed. And so you wonder, if a fleet of UAPs landed in Central Park, it would be like a 2-day story, and then it'd be like, okay, on to the next thing. Maybe we don't have the capacity to understand or accept this, whatever this is.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. I could say this. Robert Hastings, who wrote the famous book on UAPs attacking our atomic energy silos, our atomic missile silos in Montana and other places at Malmstrom Air Force Base and so forth, and turning off all of those nuclear weapons that aren't even interconnected. Like, the systems are redundant. They're not even paired together, and the UFO just hovering over top of them, turning all of them off. That goes back to the 1960s, and so I think there's been some revelations that came out of these hearings. I liked Lou Elizondo on the record said we are not alone. That's now in the congressional record that we are not alone. And he's, instead of saying he thinks so, he now emphatically said it, on the record. I think he's maybe feels a little bit more free to say something like that. So I don't know. I know people thought, we're not getting a lot of this from the congressional record here, but I felt that there was some pretty big revelations during this past hearing.
No, you're absolutely right.
Well, we want to welcome in our friend Tucker Carlson now because, wow, dropped a bombshell on the media industry this week with the launch of a brand new network, Tucker Carlson Network, and we're thrilled to have our old friend back here on Redacted to talk about that and so much more. Tucker, welcome into the show. Great to see you, my friend. Congratulations on the big announcement.
Well, congratulations to you both. I texted you about this, but it's like every week someone comes up, have you heard of Clayton and Natalie Morris and their show Redacted? Yeah, I know them. You know them? It's
you're very
so
sweet.
Cool. I am a fan of your show, let me just say. And not just because I agree with everything, which I do, but because there's just so much information. I love it. So congratulations to you.
Well, very, very sweet of you. Very, very kind of you to say. And that's a very Tucker thing to do when all the news is about Tucker and the big story is about Tucker Carlson and the launch of this new network, to turn it around on someone else. So I know this must be difficult for you because there's so much focus on you right now, and you're not comfortable with that. You love covering the news. You love covering other people. You love covering other stories. And so, it's amazing to me to see you launch this network. What was this gestational process like for you kicking off this network?
Well, I mean, it was ideological. As you know, one of the big differences between you and me is, you guys are good at business. I'm not. I'm not interested. I don't think about it. My brain doesn't work that way. Kind of the last thing I want to do is start a business. and think about that kind of thing. But it just dawned on me, based on my own experiences, including recent ones, that you really need to be protected if you have a shot of saying what you really think is true, particularly in the coming 12 months, which is, it's the most intense period, and not just in this country, but around the world. Lots of places are changing dramatically. The whole world is reshuffling, and there's going to be a lot of pressure to shut people down because the information war is the real war, of course. Words are more powerful in the end than, anything Raytheon sells, and more enduring. So they're going to try and stop people from noting obvious truths about what's happening, and if you want to be one of the few who is able to say what he thinks, you cannot be dependent on advertisers or big companies. You just can't. And that means you have to set up some kind of system that pays for a fortress of reporters and that is immune to advertiser pressure. It's just essential, and that means subscriptions, basically.
Right.
Right, but what scares me about doing something like that, also hello, haven't said hello myself, long time no talk.
Hey, Natalie.
How are you?
It's great to see you.
Yeah, you always call me Mrs. Morris, so thanks for calling me Natalie on the show. So one of the things that bothers me about doing something like that, which I guess you've sort of fortified your backbone about, is that when you have a platform now that is practicing free speech, the government tries to penetrate it with litigation or subpoenas, or so it's from the outside in. So are you afraid of that kind of thing, of being attacked, like we've seen just this week now, government going after Twitter, asking them about how they're protecting misinformation around abortion and that kind of thing? So what'd you do to get ready for that?
I say my prayers every morning, take a sauna, try to spend time with my wife and dogs and kids. Those are things that you kind of can't prepare yourself for ahead of time. Have a ready pool of cash for legal defense, of course. But really, it's inside you. Are you the sort of person who's going to get beaten down and give up? And so you need to keep yourself strong inside, not to over dramatize. But I do think a lot is at stake. And you're absolutely right that the government is one of the driving forces behind censorship, and it's always through proxies and cutouts. That's what happened to Alex Jones. The FBI was all over that, that suit, that civil suit against him that resulted in the $1 billion judgment that for a while almost put him out of business. That didn't happen in a vacuum, sorry. And so, they have a lot of ways of doing it, and doubtless they'll try. But of course, but the other thing is I've already been through some of that. Or quite a bit of it, actually. And so I'm certainly not intimidated. Maybe they'll succeed, but it's not going to stop me from talking. If it gets to the point where I'm standing downtown with a bullhorn, okay, that's where we are. But I think we have an obligation to say what we think is true. I personally have a burning need to do that. I can't respect myself if I don't. And so I'm not going to stop. But God knows what's going to happen in the next year, honestly. You both can feel it. Every person who's paying any attention at all can feel it. There are all these unresolvable conflicts that are coming to a head in the same year.
Right.
And so, it's a huge concern for me.
Yeah.
Well, you've got Israel, you've got Ukraine. You've got you've got the election, you've got the southern border, you've got child trafficking. There's a whole host of stories that seem very, very
existential.
Yeah, I think back to our time at Fox, and of course, you and I got to anchor a show together, co-host a show together. And I'm thinking about the stories that we get to cover now. Are there any stories where you feel like, oh my God, I wouldn't have been able to cover this back then? Or do you feel in some ways liberated by not having the shackles of sort of billionaires that are, kind of controlling the puppet masters behind? Are there any specific stories or things you're feeling and liberated in that way?
But you guys were never talking about things like that, oh, too bad they don't let us say this. It's almost like you weren't aware of it until you were, which makes me now.
That is okay.
Yeah. Now I'm Anna
What you just said, that's so insightful. No, but that's what you're saying is so insightful and true, and I couldn't quite put it into the words, but you just did. It's not that Clayton and I talked endlessly about the company that we worked for. We spent a lot of time together, of course, and I don't remember either one of us ever saying, "Gosh, I really want to say this, but I can't." It was more like you don't imagine that certain things, or I'll speak for myself. I could not imagine that certain things could possibly be true. And I felt like I was more open-minded than most people. Clayton certainly was. He was doing UFO research in commercial breaks. So, I think we were more open-minded than a lot of people. But again, speaking for myself, I just couldn't. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds kind of crazy, and I don't know, I just didn't go there in my own head. And now I look back at that period, so it would have been 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, and there was a lot going on, and I'm revisiting some of those stories from that time and thinking, wait a second, the wackos, or the people I thought were wackos, were really onto something. And maybe not the whole story, but there's definitely something there. And I'll just give you one example, which is and I was writing about it this morning in a piece that we're doing on Julian Assange, who we visited in prison. The emails from the DNC in 2016 that showed that the Hillary campaign had rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders, who had popular support, grassroots support. She did not. She was fully AstroTurf corporate candidate. And they told us that Russia stole those emails. Well, that's not true. And it was kind of obvious at the time that it wasn't true. Bill Binney did a big piece on this in The Nation. Like, as a tech matter, that couldn't have happened. So someone from inside the building leaked those to WikiLeaks, and Assange has effectively said the same thing. So, like, what is that? So there was all this energy invested in convincing the rest of us that Russia did it, that it did not come from within the DNC, and just shut up, you're crazy, you're a conspiracy nut. And they were lying. So what does that mean? Why were they lying? What were they hiding? Something. And so that's the story. And I don't know the answers to all of those questions, but I do know they were lying. I do know Russia didn't do it. And so, I wish I'd spent a lot more time on that story, for example, at the time, but I didn't.
One of the things that strikes me so much about that period, and I was at NBC and you guys were at Fox, is that we were fighting over racism and gender, about whether or not the media was being unfair to Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton. Exactly. And if Fox, and if the right or any media that supported the right really wanted to go after the establishment on the left, why did they leave the war crimes on the table? And so that's what makes me realize that it is two sides of the same coin, because you could have picked up the fact that Obama droned more people in the Middle East than any of his predecessors, the fact that Hillary Clinton was starting wars.
And he won a Nobel Peace Prize for it.
Why were we so busy with race and gender? Why did, and that's what kills me so much, is that if they really wanted to go after the establishment left, why leave all the war? Why leave all the blood on the floor?
Well, I couldn't agree more. And of course, I mean, they do it because conversations about race particularly incite animal fears in people and make them unreasonable immediately. But the truth is that the differences between races, which are real, are not that big. But other differences are big. And the difference between someone who makes $1 billion and a person who makes $50,000 a year, those are much bigger than the difference between the races. Okay, that's just true. And so it is, to some extent, a cover for the crimes of a few when they, gin up race hatred among the population, which they are absolutely doing. That's not organic. I never walk down, I live in this country, I've always lived here. I never walk down, no one ever yells at me because of my race, ever. And I just don't, like, the level of actual racial hostility, black, white, Hispanic, whatever, between the races in the United States is so much lower than they're constantly pretending it is, just in day-to-day life. I know you felt the same way. You don't hear people see people getting in fistfights because they're different colors. What? Right. But if you watched only NBC or these channels, you would think that that was the state of play in the United States. It's not. And so they're telling you that to divert your attention from the wars, which I actually have been passionately against since I went to Iraq in 2003, but not enough, I agree with you, but also from the financial crimes. So you can, like, invent a fake cryptocurrency and steal, billions of dollars from 1 million separate individual investors and give some to your parents to buy beachfront property in the Bahamas, and it's not that big a story. Well, in my view, that's a really big story. That's a huge story. Like, what? The Federal Reserve prints all this money, trillions of dollars. They have a permanent emergency for over 10 years. 0 interest rates. Where does all that money go? So the Fed prints the money. What happens then? Well, it goes to a select number of banks, which have, encoded in regulation, have a special deal where they just get rich no matter what. Well, why is that fair? And by the way, why are we taxing people double for working? You pay half the taxes if you invest as you do if you work. So are we saying investing is twice as virtuous as working? I mean, that's like an actual debate we should have, but we don't, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because we're mad about race. So yeah, I totally think we've been had. Totally.
Well, you're going to really piss off Al Gore. Al Gore this weekend said that the mainstream media is really your source for news and information. And if you're alternative media, then of course that's misinformation, and we really need to clamp down on that. The alternative media, the free media, the independent media, that's where you get into trouble. I mean, I'm just thinking about the cornucopia of stories that you've covered, that the alternative media covers, that the mainstream media doesn't even touch. For instance, why did a lot of people get rich or trade stocks before the October 7th attack? That's a good question. How did people know about that and made lots of money off of that? We could run down the 9/11 story.
And who were those people, by the way?
Right.
That's what I like.
Wouldn't you love to know?
Who were they? Yeah, I would. How about what country were they in? No, I agree with you completely.
So alternative media is seen as, of course, a major threat, and the independent media is seen as a major threat. When you look at, you've been in the belly of the beast. You worked at CNN. You worked at MSNBC. Of course, you worked at Fox as well. Do you see a massive disconnect between the mainstream media and what alternative media is able to cover these days?
Well, I just think it's dying, and the audience numbers show it. I mean, for one thing, in addition to all of the other sins, and by the way, running cover for the most powerful people in your society and pretending you're not doing it, that is a sin, just to be clear. But in addition to that, on a non-moral level, just as a viewer, it's very boring to be, and it's boring for a specific reason. So if I have a mission in what I'm telling you, if the whole point of my telling you this is to convince you of something specific, right? If it's the definition of propaganda, I have to keep repeating it endlessly. I can't sort of veer off into something I find interesting, like how did they build the pyramids? I'm probably not going to get into that because my job is to convince you that Zelensky is Churchill, and so that's all I'm going to talk about, or that whatever it is, whatever the lie is. And so they wind up repeating like the same four stories forever. January 6th was a white supremacist insurrection. Okay. Okay, I disagree. I don't think you're right. But if you tell me that every single day for 3 years, not only does your propaganda fail, with me anyway, because I'm like, why are they telling me this again? But you also drive me off because you're boring me to death. Like, I want to hear something else. I want to hear something interesting. I want curious people gathering my news. Curiosity is the key to the news business. And that's what I always loved about you, Clayton. We'd sit there and you'd be like, can you believe this? Of course, none of it ever made air, but you were like so excited about the thing, about your like intellectual journey in your own head. And that's a prerequisite for journalism. Like, you have to be that kind of person. Like, wait, what a second. Wait, what? How'd that happen? What do you mean? You know what I mean? And they're the opposite of that. They're like, shut up, we know how it happened, and if you ask any questions about how it happened, then you're insane. It's like, no, I'm not insane. Or maybe I'm insane, but it's still a fair question. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So like, no one wants to watch that shit, actually. It's stultifying, and their numbers are in such steep decline that NBC News is not going to exist in 10 years. There's no chance. And programs like yours, I checked your numbers as I was sitting waiting to go on. It's like, they're ridiculous. They're huge. And who would have predicted that, actually?
Right.
You just like, get in a studio with your wife and talk about things you think are interesting, and all of a sudden you've got like a lot of people, my next door neighbor's watching you every day. Who in the world? No, I'm serious though. Who could have predicted that 10 years ago? You'd be like, no, Clayton and his wife have gone off the deep end and they're like talking to themselves in this weird little closet. No. The world is watching them. And that's the model. I'm not joking. Like, it's crazy. It's what's happening now. Last thing I'll say is the promise of the internet originally. The promise originally was, everyone gets a voice, you get to hear all kinds of perspectives. That kind of died for a while. We're hearing one perspective, and it reached its peak when they took Parler off the internet. And now I really think it's reemerging because that other stuff is just, its era has passed, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I'm scared every day of the things that we talk about, and I realize that the stories that we cover give me politics by cooties. And I realized that I would be non grata in my
Cooties?
Well, yeah, that's what it is, right? Because I'm willing to ask questions about the COVID vaccines. I'm willing to read books about Ukraine's history. I'm willing to spend my weekends doing that, which gives me politics by cooties, which I know now that in the circles I ran in when I was still in the mainstream media would make me seem like a kook. And I'm afraid not only of losing those friendships, but I'm afraid of the fallout that happens around that, things that happen to people that I respect. But at the same time, I care more about the world that we leave our kids, and you can't say nothing right now.
Amen.
And so that's the reason that we do this, even though I'm always scared. I mean, you and Clayton don't seem as scared as me.
No,
but
I wanted to ask you that question. Are there stories you're scared to cover? Because there'll be times, and I know you are hit with a torrent of information on a daily basis, way more than I am. And I mean, you have contacts all around the world that are, there's probably someone on the space station right now texting you with information about something. And so are there things that you're scared to cover? You're sitting there saying, wow, this is like soul crushing, like to the point where like it really scares you in your soul.
There are two. Yes, there are two. One is the 2020 election. And I think that I was far too dismissive of some of the claims made about it. And I think there may be some merit to some of the wildest possible claims about that election. And I haven't proven it yet, but I've, look, I'll just say, and you know this, of course, very well, both of you, that whenever you have politics, you've got a lot of sleazy people and liars and people who just want to get their candidate elected or get paid or whatever. You've got a lot of lying around all political campaigns, so it's very hard to know what's true. And sometimes it takes years to figure it out. So there were a lot of stupid mercenaries making claims about fraud in that past election that were, they couldn't back up. But that doesn't mean that all of those ideas were wrong, and I think that some of them were right. Is what I'm learning, and I'll just leave it there. The second thing that bothers me is the UFO story, and the more you dig into that and talk to people with actual knowledge of it, again, that's another story where there are some fanciful ideas floating around that are just there's no evidence that they're true. But if you talk to people who have actual knowledge of it that they gathered themselves, there are parts of that story that I do not understand at all that are really, really, really dark. It's so dark that I haven't told my wife about it. I mean, I haven't verified any of this, but this is not just stuff that I read on the internet. I know you all are very, very grounded in that story, so I think I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. But there's some stuff there that's just like, man, I'm not even sure what that means. There's a spiritual component there that I don't fully understand. So yes, that story bothers me. And I think, last thing I'll say, that one of the reasons that we've had all these disclosures and all of these, 10 whistleblowers at this point, and it hasn't really become front page news. Part of it's suppression. Parts of the government don't want you to know about it, but part of it is the public can't deal with it. It's too far out. The implications are too profound. And I understand that. Because I've heard things where I'm just like, oh man, I don't even really want to know that, honestly.
Deeply disturbing stuff. Forget like saucers and technology. It's deeply disturbing stuff that I haven't even told Natalie. Yep. I agree with you. It's so disturbing. Exactly. I can't even tell my kids. My kids ask me different stories about it, and I won't say it because it's so dark. It's so dark.
I totally agree.
Miles is watching. So.
Okay, Miles, if you're watching the show, Daddy's not going to tell you about that part of the UFO stuff and what's going on with the government.
Can I say one thing? They've known clearly, I mean, this is, I think, established, and I feel comfortable saying this as fact. The U.S. government, I mean, these are real, whatever they are. They're not human. And the government has known that for a long time, possibly going back to the 1930s at least. And, of course, there's tons of evidence in the written record, in the physical record, in paintings, and in literature, that people have been seeing and interacting with these things for a long time. So we know that. But the justification one often hears is, well, the government, various presidents who have been read in, not all have been, haven't wanted to disclose this because it would scare people. And I've always thought that's bullshit. You're hiding a crime, which they are, by the way, in my opinion. But I do think there's a sense in which that's not totally crazy. Like, there is some stuff, if it's true, and I'm kind of thinking it may be true, that's so radical that Yeah, well, as we both said, we don't want to tell the people we love most about it because, like, why would you disturb someone like that? So I kind of get that. I hate to admit it. I'm not arguing for hiding things. I believe in the truth and I believe in disclosure, but I understand the impulse. Like, holy smokes, this is heavy. You know what I mean?
And the government's involvement in it makes it even heavier because then you realize the complicity.
Exactly.
Of it. Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about the same thing. I can tell. Okay.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
Should I go?
No. This is what we used to talk about in commercial breaks all the time. This is the kind of stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, so at the time, I never would have believed any of that. But now I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had a number of journalists on the show who've been debanked over the years. In fact, one of them just landed in Iran. Wyatt Reed, friend of the show, great journalist who just landed in Iran for his coverage there. I was sitting next to him one afternoon in an interview. In the middle of the interview, he found out that he had just been debanked. Why? For his coverage of the Ukraine war. And so that's where Rumble Wallet comes in. It's a self-custodial wallet that lives inside an ecosystem that actually defends free speech and financial freedom. No bank holding your balance, not even Rumble can touch your funds. This is your money on your keys, on your terms. You can also support creators if you want to do that, but it connects your money to a marketplace of ideas that refuses to cave to censorship. So if you're serious about sovereignty, financial and digital, this is where you level up. Go to wallet.rumble.com or just search for Rumble Wallet in the App Store. Do your research on it, dive deeply into it, download it, back up your recovery phrase, and move your money where it's safe away from these big banks that can debank you at a moment's notice. Wallet.rumble.com is the place to go. Well, my next guest is Tucker Carlson. You might know him from his eponymously titled show, Tucker Carlson Tonight, on the Fox News Channel. I know Tucker as a lifelong friend, and I'm thrilled to have him for the very first time here on Redacted. Tucker, welcome to the show.
I'm so honored to be here, Clayton. And I should just say I reached out to you because 3 times, not just because we're old friends and we talk anyway, but because 3 times in the last month, 3 separate times, I'm talking to people who don't know you or know that we know each other. You start telling me about watching you and Natalie on Redacted. And I'm like, wait, I know them. I'm friends with them. No way. You know them? And I'm like, yeah, I literally know them. So I was like, I got to get on this show. So cool.
Well, that's hilarious. Well, that's really incredibly flattering. But I have to say the same thing happens to me all the time. I was watching Tucker last night, and they don't know that I know you. And so yes. A lot of people may not know that Tucker and I were co-anchors when he first came to Fox News many years ago. One of the things I have to say I learned from you is that you are unflappable, and in ways that I have just never seen from another human being. And I want to ask you about that. In a week when, you've been taking all manner of, personal hits because showing January 6th footage that subverts people's narratives, you don't ever really seem to give a rat's ass. When people like John Oliver call you out for being a preppy, or when politicians like Mitt Romney or Chuck Schumer call you traitorous, how do you protect yourself from taking things personally? And do you feel any of these slings and arrows this week at all?
I hate to say it. I know I sound like a sociopath, but I'm not. First of all, I'm not even aware of most of it because I don't have a TV and I don't spend that much time online. But I'm just the way I'm made. I had a difficult childhood when I was little, and that's sad. But it definitely inoculated me against caring what people who don't like me think. That's the kind of the one takeaway from my young childhood was you can't control what other people think. Decide whose opinions you care about, the people who you love, your family, your close friends, your coworkers, and then, everyone else, I guess everyone wants to be liked. I really don't care, but like if some liar is attacking me, it's dogs barking. It means nothing. I would say my great fear in life is destroying myself through my own misdeeds, lying or drinking again, or, cheating on my wife, or, doing something awful that makes everyone I love hate me. Right. I don't want to do those things at all. And so if I have nightmares, it's doing that. But like being attacked by people I don't respect, like Mitt Romney or Mitch McConnell or some other, buffoon Schumer. I mean, it's like, it doesn't even rate. It doesn't even mean anything to me. It's a foreign language.
And I mean, and people watching might say, there's no way that Tucker, who works in television, has one of the largest television shows in the world, doesn't have a television. And I can attest to that. I mean, we would sit there on the couch when we worked together, and people would ask, hey, Tucker, have you watched, this show on Netflix? And you're like, I don't have a TV. Like, this is true. He does not have a TV.
Yeah.
And you spend time in the woods fishing, and you enjoy life, and you're a great family man. You spend time with your family around the things that are important. So I can attest to that, firsthand knowledge of that.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Part of it is I'm very dyslexic, and so I don't process video very well. It makes me anxious to watch moving pictures. It's too much for me. So part of it's not that I'm just like so refined that I only read Balzac. It's, I do read actually, but it's not just that. It's that I just don't like video at all. One of my girls had a show on an iPad over Christmas, and I watched about 15 minutes, and it was like kind of brilliant. But oh man, it just rattled my cage, scrambled my eggs. Like, it affected my sleep. It was too emotionally intense for me. So yeah, whatever. But the point is, the things that matter in your life are right in front of you. They're your children and your spouse and your dogs and your college roommate and your former co-anchor, like other
Right.
people who you know and love, your employees who you're responsible for. Like, that's the point of life. It's not Twitter. I really believe that.
Hallelujah. Well, when we worked together at Fox, it was certainly a partisan time. I mean, even thinking back to like the 1990s, we didn't know each other then, but then you could have fun conversations about politics with someone. You could get together over a beer at a restaurant and so forth and talk politics. And now things have just gotten incredibly ugly and divisive. We see journalists now specifically not reporting stories if they don't like the outcome of those stories. Like the U.S. destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, you would think that a scoop like January 6th footage, like Watergate, right? You had competing newspapers that were like, oh shit, the Washington Post has this story. The New York Times is like, we've got to get our own confirmation of this story. Competing networks would want to rush to do their own reporting on the actual story, but instead they just want to tear you apart. So what do you think has happened to journalism? I know that you're a big proponent of it. You think it's largely one of the most important professions in the world. So what do you think has happened to journalism?
Yeah. Well, I've always thought that. I'm the son of a journalist, the great grandson of a journalist. I mean, I'm a reader. A lot of my heroes were journalists. So I've always thought that. I still think that. I don't think you can have a democracy without an informed population, and the way they get informed is through journalism primarily. So it's essential. It's an essential ingredient in self-government. You shouldn't treat it lightly or laugh at its demise. It's like a huge loss that we don't have it anymore, but we don't. Effectively, you have news organizations speaking on behalf of and for the benefit of the people who are already in power. It's a direct inversion of what we're supposed to have. It's terrifying, I think. And it's also very annoying. And there are a lot of things that have happened, but I would say big picture, what you're seeing is religious wars. Even as people become less openly religious, I personally believe, despite all the barking about race and identity and black people and white people and Latinx or whatever they're calling themselves, like, I actually don't think racial divisions are as big a deal as we make them out to be. I have almost never met anybody of a different race who's like mad at me or I'm mad at them. I think we overstate the level of racial division. I just don't experience it at all in my life. I mean, I live in a mostly white area, but I deal with a lot of people, including a couple of really close friends who are not white. That's not even an issue. We're pretending that race is the division when actually politics has supplanted race. This is what I'm just observing, and religion as the main dividing line. It's become its own religion. So like people my age, I'm 53, are like, well, I remember when you could be friends with people who voted for different candidates,
Right.
But it's also true when I was a kid, there was like a meaningful distinction between Protestant and Catholic. I'm Protestant, very Protestant. I didn't ever talk to anyone about Catholicism. I've never met a nun in my life. Our world was more divided along different lines.
Right.
If I'm just being honest, there was more racial division too in 1969 when I was born than there is now. And you see it in the polling. Would you be in 1969 when I was born? If you asked a cross section of Americans, would you be upset if one of your children married outside of your race? And people are much more free to say what they thought then also, but I think the majority would say, oh yeah, for sure. That number has been dropping dramatically. People are, and I certainly feel it myself. But the question of whether you would be one of your children married outside your political affiliation, that's become much clearer. So, in other words, your average liberal or your average conservative, your average Republican, average Democrat is fine. My daughter's marrying some guy from Ethiopia. Okay, great. Whatever. He's a good guy. I'm for it. That's how I feel anyway. But most people feel this way. But he's on the other side. He likes Trump or he hates Trump. Like, no, that's a deal killer. So just again, politics has become something very different from what it used to be. It is the dividing line.
Right.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. And you've seen friendships destroyed over it. You've seen, if someone took a stand about a vaccine or about January 6th or said something on a social media post, their friendship is done. I mean, they've been
right.
They've been excommunicated, basically because of this. And you see,
well, it's crazy, but that's mostly one way, though. I mean, I wouldn't, obviously, I'm not going to take an untested vaccine because the government tells me to. That's insane. So I didn't. Right. I mean, and I don't judge others who did, but I would never take that, So I did not take the vaccine. No way. And now I'm really happy that I didn't. But I'm not mad at people who did. Like, I have family members who did, loved ones who did. Like, I'm not mad that they took the vaccine. I feel sorry for them secretly, but I wouldn't even say that. But if I go and say, well, I would never take an untested vax, like I trust Pfizer, I don't think so. If I say something like that, people are like very offended even now. And it's really kind of only in one direction. I'm sorry, that has been my experience.
I think you're right. And I feel so sorry for the people who were 70 years old and, they're not maybe as plugged in as you or I are and understanding what a corrupt, sort of criminal organization companies like Pfizer are actually. And they just go along with what, someone in their community told them to do, or there was the community center set up a vaccine drive. And so grandma felt like that was the best thing to do. The family was pushing them.
Exactly.
So why should we be angry at grandma for doing what the community was telling her to do? It seems insane.
No.
Yeah.
Well, it would be insane and also a sign of bad character. I have to say, speaking for myself as someone who, just to be blunt, is from, an elite background. I grew up in rich places around rich people with power. It's very shocking for me to see my former world go completely crazy. Like, I have the least respect for the people that I grew up around that I do for any group. I'll say this. Like, no one's Guatemalan housekeeper has ever yelled at me, ever. And I don't expect ever to be yelled at by a Guatemalan housekeeper. I'm dead serious. And I've taken pictures of quite a few Guatemalan housekeepers. Oh, Mr. Carlson, you are so great. Thank you. I have been yelled at multiple times on the ski lift in Jackson Hole by some private equity wife who went to Williams, you know what I mean? Who spent an hour this morning, in Soul Cycle, and she hates me. And she's calling me Hitler on the ski lift. Like, so it's very kind of social class specific. I find that the most radical people by far are the ones who've been the greatest beneficiaries of the rotten system that people like Trump, whatever his faults, called out. Or me, and I'm a product of that system. So I think I can fairly assess it. Like, I know how rotten it is because that's where I'm from. Those people are the craziest of all. It's 45-year-old angry liberal white female lawyers. They are the maddest people I've ever met in my life. If I never meet another 45-year-old female attorney who went to Williams, I will be happy because those ladies want to kill me. I don't know what the hell is going on. I think it's because their husbands are weak. I honestly think that. I think weak husbands make angry women, or something very deep is going on. But you can't tell me I'm imagining this because I can't go to the Snake River Grill in Jackson anymore because one of these chicks is going to start screeching at me about white supremacy. White supremacy? What? What? I don't even know what that is. I know I'm against it. Like, why are you yelling at me, honey, and tell me I'm like overturning democracy? I bet if I went into the kitchen at the Snake River Grill in Jackson, I don't think a single dishwasher would yell at me. I am positive of that.
Well, you bring up something really interesting, which is something I wanted to talk about, which is this weaponization of language, right? You can just hurl something at someone and it shuts down conversation. So someone can just walk up to you and call you a white supremacist or a racist or any random, anti-vax. And it really is this weaponization of language. You've lived in DC for many, many years. Have you seen this, like, Have you seen a shift in the use of language in that way? Maybe the left
Yes.
using it differently over the years to weaponize it?
Well, it's totally unmoored from physical reality or any variety of reality. I mean, words just aren't tethered to, real things at all. And I remember, and I love words, and of course I use words as you do for a living. That's what I do, is work with words. I think they have inherent power. I respect that power. I think the word's the most powerful thing in the universe, which is why despots try to control them. But I remember the first time I was called a white supremacist, I was really stung by it. I say I don't pay attention to criticism, but I'll never forget that day. It was 2017, and I just started the show that I'm on. A white supremacist? Like, what? And again, I'm not exactly sure what that is, but that's like the lowest. I mean, I'm from Southern California. Like, there were no white supremacists in my world. People didn't use racial slurs. Like, what? I mean, I grew up at like kind of like peak integration world. I'm very Dr. Seussy liberal on that stuff. Thinking, I can't believe they're calling me that. Some guy at Vox called me that. And I was like, do I sue? Like, I was so upset.
Yeah.
And then I was also bewildered. And then I realized over a period of years, now I've lost all feeling about it. It's just, again, it's meaningless. But that was purely an effort to make me be quiet on subjects that had nothing to do with race at all, like immigration or the economy, Nord Stream. Tulsi Gabbard, who's a wonderful person and a friend of mine, I remember she asked the simple question, like, why are we funding a war in Syria? And I thought that was a totally fair question. Shut up, racist! So they're calling like the non-white liberal Democrat a racist because she questions our Syria policy? And that's when I was like, oh, I get it. They're not sincere people. They don't mean a word they say. They just want her to be quiet. And they just don't want to talk about anything that matters. They want to talk about race, which is unsolvable. You're born a race, you stay that race. Okay, it's not an interesting conversation. I don't know why we're still talking about it. What's interesting are the things that you can affect and change, like whether or not to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline, whether or not to start World War III, whether or not to drive your economy into the ditch with your Fed policy. Like, these are real debates that we should be having, but we're not, because racist. It's all just a weapon designed to divert your attention from their crimes. And I'm just, now at this point, inside, I am bulletproof. I really don't care at all. You blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, you freaking criminals. That's how I feel about it.
And we just saw two amazing journalists go before Congress this week, Matt Taibbi and
Yes.
Michael Schellenberger. They are independent journalists exposing the deep state collusion with big tech, the censoring of voices. I know you've had Matt and Michael on your show. You would think that Congress would be interested in this, but instead members of Congress mocked them right to their face, even called them so-called journalists. Which is hilarious to me, so-called journalists. So what troubles you the most about this erosion of free speech, something you cover extensively on your show?
Well, it's the linchpin of freedom, of course. If you can't say what you think, then you're a slave. I mean, it's just kind of that simple. So if you're going to have a free country, the first thing you need to do, and the first thing the framers did do, was protect in writing the right to say what you believe is true. And that's the first thing they go for, because words are the most powerful thing. I should say, I want to revise what I said a second ago, and bless you for bringing them up. I was, groaning about journalism. I've been in it for 32 years. It's all I've ever done. And it's so distressing to me to see it collapse. But guys like Schellenberger and Taibbi, I would even say Russell Brand, who just was at my house this week for dinner, wonderful man. The gap is being filled, not enough, but to a remarkable degree, by people rising to the occasion, becoming something they weren't before. In other words, I believe in balance as a spiritual matter, as almost a matter of physics. I think it is a physics principle, balance. And so as things get shittier and people become worse and they tell more lies, there is balance in the universe where a certain percentage of people decide, well, I'm not lying anymore, and I don't care. Naomi Wolf is another one of them, who, if you'd said to me 5 years ago, would you be, texting feverishly in agreement with Naomi Wolf at 3 a.m? What? No.
Right.
Or Taibbi, for that matter, who I really respect as a man and a journalist, and as a good guy too. Elon Musk, while not perfect, has done a lot. Elon Musk, really, the electric car dude? Like, I never would have thought that. So there are these incredible miracles. They are miracles from my perspective happening, where these people as everyone else, as people like Bill Kristol have just like descended into the pit of filth. And it's so distressing as someone who once knew him. And I can say this of many people in journalism, the entire staff of National Reviewer, people I knew who've really become so diminished and are serving evil, in my opinion. That is counterbalanced by this explosion of your show. I mean, every time someone's like Clayton Morris, I'm like, I love it. It's so, no, I mean it. It's not false praise at all. It's totally sincere.
Oh, thank you.
It's just incredible how great, as most people have gotten worse, some people have just gotten great. I mean, Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald, among everyone in journalism, probably spent more time attacking me personally by name in the 1990s and early 2000s than everybody else put together. I mean, they really hated me, and I really hated them. And now I have both those guys on my show. I don't interrupt. I don't say a word. I'm so honored to have them. I admire them. I'm not ashamed to say that. Like, that's incredible. To have your own preconceptions overturned in a good way is one of the great joys of living, I think.
That's amazing. Well said. And it speaks to your evolution too in journalism and as a human being, right? I mean, to be able to see, you've talked openly about this. You and I have talked about this off camera, and I don't feel bad about talking about it now because you've publicly talked about this in interviews, sort of your evolution supporting it once the Iraq war back in the day. And
yes.
then growing from that and becoming a real anti-war voice. And I think being inflexible is one of the worst human characteristics. I think being flexible allows you to grow in that way. And I think I will say this, you're an amazing example of that.
I would say even more than that, the most important experience in the life of a man is humiliation and failure. And I was not only wrong about Iraq, but I was so wrong that I was humiliated by it. And I mean, no one attacked me for it because that was the common view at the time, but I hosted a daily TV show in 2002 and early 2003 in the run-up to the Iraq war. Not only did I support it against my better instincts, but I also attacked people who didn't support it by suggesting they were like unpatriotic or on the side of terrorism. Or I really used the lowest possible propaganda techniques to smear people who disagreed with me. And then I went to Iraq in the winter of 2003, right after the invasion, and my life changed forever. And the reason it changed was because I realized how wrong I was. And I made the decision that I had to admit it, and I did admit it in December of 2003 in a New York Times interview. And I'll never forget it. I got a text from an email from one of my former editors, who's a big neocon, was like, that's disgraceful that you criticized the Iraq war. And I remember thinking, I'm making a permanent break with my old life now because people won't accept this, but I just couldn't continue, A, to tell lies, and B, to pretend that I hadn't previously told lies, because I had. And so I do think the beginning of all wisdom is acknowledging just how screwed up you are. That's the basis of Christianity, but it's also the basis, again, of human wisdom. It's like, I'm the problem. I screwed it up. I am not God. If you start there, you're much more likely to wind up at the truth. And so I just made a decision, and it's hardened over the years, and now it's just ironclad. I'm not lying. I'm just not going to lie. I'm almost 54, not going to live forever. I don't care. I'm not going to lie. Now, if I started, using drugs and alcohol again, and maybe I would lie. I hope not, but I probably would. But in my current sober mind, where I've been for 21 years, I'm just not going to lie. And if I get something wrong, I'm just going to admit it. And people accept that. They appreciate it. It adds to your credibility. It doesn't diminish you. It enhances you. Oh, I fucked it up. I'm really sorry. My sincere apologies. I thought this. Now I know this. And I'm bringing it to you. If you do that, people trust you. Why wouldn't they? That's true in our personal lives, too. So I'm not lying anymore. And when I saw this Nord Stream thing and they tried to tell me it was Russia, and I said, why would Russia blow up its, I didn't know, but what, explain the motive to me here. Why would Russia blow up its main source of income, right in the middle of a war? I don't think so. And rather than answer that question or come up with some hypothesis that might win me over, they immediately go to, oh, you're shilling for Putin. And by that point, I've never met Putin. I've never been to Russia. I love Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, but that's kind of the extent of my Russophilia. So, that's insane. I'm not shilling for Putin. I'm an American. Stop. What's the answer? And anyway, that's one of among 1,000 examples. You know, what's wrong
Yeah.
with natural immunity? Like, tell me how that doesn't work or whatever. Just to decide, I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to go along with these lies, is the most liberating thing you can do. No, whether it leads to professional success or failure, it doesn't matter. It enhances you as a person. It makes you stronger. Every time you tell the truth, you become stronger. You feel this power coming into you. By contrast, every time you lie, you get smaller and weaker and more afraid. Think about the times you've lied in your life to hide something from someone else. You become smaller and more afraid the more you lie.
Right.
And so it's been this amazing and beautiful experience for me to be in the face of all these lies and feel like I don't have to go along with this at all. And like, were you going to fire me? Okay, fine, go ahead. I'm still not lying. Are you going to arrest me? Go ahead. I'm not lying, period.
And they'll try to keep foisting crap on you. I want to get to the January 6th stuff in a second here and get you out of here. I want to try to be respectful of your time. But do you ever feel lonely? Because as far as the mainstream media goes, you are an island, a voice, an anti-war voice that I don't see anywhere else. We often feature you on our show as one of the only anti-war voices out there in the mainstream media. That's got to be just stunning to think about when the anti-war movement of the 60s and it's just gone, right? It's just dissolved. It's disappeared.
Yeah.
And now, if you speak out against the war, you're a Putin apologist or whatever. And do you ever feel alone in that? I mean, in the mainstream media, do you ever get the criticism, but do you ever feel alone in that?
Well, I did on February 24th, 2022, when Russia rolled across the border into Ukraine, and my position had been, consistent all along. Like, it feels like we're pushing these countries toward war. It's very clear to me the U.S. government wanted this war, has prevented it from ending. We know from Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli prime minister, that the Biden administration ended the peace accords between those two countries. They want war. And I said that. And I said that right at the beginning. To send the vice president to the Munich Security Conference a week before the war to tell Zelensky in public at a press conference, we want you to join NATO. And I said this at the time. I think every clear-thinking person saw it. It's like, if you were encouraging China to put nuclear weapons in Tijuana, like, that would be a massive threat to our country, to our national security, of course. And that's what we were encouraging. So why would you encourage that if you weren't trying to push Putin to war? Clearly they were. And I said that, and I mean, I don't think there was anybody who agreed with me in public, not one person. There were, a lot of people that I work around who are very offended by that. I still think it's true. It is true. As far as I know, it's true.
Oh, yeah.
And I've just never changed. I'm gratified to see that public opinion has swung. But again, even if, look, this is too big an issue to sit out, it's too big an issue to lie about, maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe Putin does have designs on Belgium. Maybe if we don't stop him in the Donbass, they're going to be in San Antonio. Maybe I'm just completely on another planet. Maybe there's no risk of nuclear war. Maybe the Biden administration really was trying to broker a peace. Maybe they're not trying to steal Crimea. I mean, maybe everybody is sane except me. Maybe they didn't blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. At this point, I can only repeat what I believe, and I'm saying what I really think, and I think it really, really matters. And if I get fired for it, I don't know what to say. I'm not going to change. And if I will say, I probably shouldn't admit this, but the people that I work for, whatever you think of the company that I work for, one of them, one of the top people, texted me the other day about something, very nice text, and said, I just, but for the record, I really disagree with you on Ukraine. And I wrote back and I said, I know you do. And I'm so grateful that you let me disagree with you in public. This is someone I work for, a well-known person. I was like, I'm so grateful that you let me disagree. I think that's an incredibly rare thing. I don't think that's allowed in any other news organization. So whatever you think of Fox, not a perfect company, of course. You worked there for years. But they are allowing me to say things they disagree with. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Unlike what we've seen on YouTube, where our show has been blocked, banned, and taken down for having disagreements about the Ukraine war, and taken down for two weeks.
Are you serious?
Yeah, we've had 4 times now. 4 times that's happened over the past year because of because of their their pro Ukraine stance, and when you call out the bullshit and show the propaganda and you share that information, you get blocked. I don't know if they've softened their position or not, but that's the way it's been.
That's crazy. I mean, but I guess the difference is I work for a huge publicly held company, and there are certainly downsides to that. But one upside is it doesn't matter what YouTube thinks. But if you're an independent broadcaster making your own journalism, and you've got, in your case, 3 children and, like a life, and this is your job, that's really scary. That's really scary.
And that's how they've been silencing voices. That's what they've been doing, taking down these small channels. They've been doing that. We saw that on Twitter, right? We saw what was happening on Twitter. So the Twitter files revealed exactly this collusion. I do want to talk about January 6th. So the January 6th footage, when Kevin McCarthy came to you and your team about going through this footage, did he ever, we're talking about caveats and conditions, what you just talked about with Fox. Did Kevin McCarthy come to you with any sort of caveats or conditions? Chuck Schumer has said, that Tucker's been cherry picking things he wants to show on the show, which is laughable, of course, because in my opinion, we got to see already cherry picked coverage during the January 6th hearing. So it's pretty hilarious and hypocritical to me. But anyway, your response to these cherry picking comments, and were there sort of any conditions about here, we're going to hand over 44,000 hours of footage? What was your thought on that? I mean, knowing you, like, holy shit, what? We're going to look at 44,000 hours of footage?
Well, we've been pushing for it since the first week. One of my children was in the building when that happened.
Wow.
One of my kids works in the Congress and called me. I was getting my hair cut. Ashley Babbitt had just been shot. He heard the gunshots because he was right there. I mean, as an employee, not as a protester, to be clear. But so I had been interested in it. Of course, I'm from Washington, so I had been interested in it. And since the first week, I had said we should, let's find out what really happened. Everyone's characterizing it, and my instinct as a journalist, but just also as a person, is let's know more. And they never turned it over. And for the record, I had been highly, highly critical of McCarthy, of Kevin McCarthy, for the last, I don't know, ever since I've been on TV, I've been critical of McCarthy. So we're not friends, for sure. Why did he give it to my show? Probably because I asked. I think we're the only people who asked. I mean, maybe there were others. I'm not aware of anyone else who asked. We asked. And here's the process in one sentence. We sent a bunch of producers up to Capitol Hill. They came with a bunch of different stories they were interested in. They got a computer system. The use of the Capitol computer system, which allowed them to pull up separate rooms by location and time. They did not have facial recognition software, unfortunately, but they had this system which allowed what was happening in the speaker's lobby at this hour, and they watched all the tape, many hours. And of the 41,000, a huge percentage, the majority, the Capitol complex is enormous. It includes the Library of Congress. There are security cameras in closets. A lot of this stuff was just empty rooms. But of the relevant footage, we're not aware, and trust me, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out if we were being manipulated here. I don't think there's any way they could have manipulated it. It is definitely possible that we didn't find relevant footage, for sure. That's always possible. But the two things I know are no one got in our way, including the Capitol Police, who later denounced us. We ran all of our footage by Capitol Police before putting it on TV and said, just to be clear, you are saying this could be a security risk. Is it a security risk? And only in one case, he said, we don't want you to show the details of this door. So we blurred the door. That's
in the
it.
Jacob Chansley video. Yeah, that blurred section of the Jacob Chansley.
Exactly right. And I announced that on the air. That's the only change we made. But we vetted this, not because I thought it was a security risk. It's a public building that has tours through it every day. I thought the whole thing was ridiculous. So this security risk bullshit. But I went along with it anyway, just to say that we did. Okay? So we could never be accused of putting anyone's life at risk, absurd as that claim is. And then we put it on the air. And, I wish we had gotten more, had found more. I mean, the main problem we had was we didn't have facial recognition software. So I'm allowing for the possibility, I would say the distinct possibility, that we missed stuff. I'm sure we missed a lot of stuff. We did our best, and we spent a long time doing it, but 3 weeks. And the guys who did it, the producers who did it, were just absolutely fried. I saw them when they finished, and they they both looked like they went through a war. Just like staring at a screen for 3 weeks is a lot. But no, we had full cooperation from the Capitol Police and from the Speaker's office. But what we couldn't do, which is the main thing I wanted to do, which was show that there were FBI agents in the crowd. And there were, and the FBI has admitted that. But it's obvious to me they played a pivotal role. Ray Epps clearly was working for somebody. He was not a pure civilian. He encouraged violence, and then the January 6th committee and Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson and Adam Schiff, they all defended him. He's their friend. What? He's not an insurrectionist. He's an ally. Like, explain that. It violates common sense, okay?
Right.
But we couldn't answer a lot of these questions because we couldn't identify the people positively. And because we couldn't put their video on the screen, because what if we're wrong? I mean, I tried to be as responsible as we could be. Like, there were a lot of things going on there, as you know, that were clearly part of something that was not organic. It was very obvious. Guys with earpieces, breaking things, and then running away when they're filmed. Like, what is that? And some of these people are so obviously cops. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, you know?
Right.
Some like bodybuilder type with short hair and a MAGA hat. And he's kind of, oh, spare me. A guy with a gun. You know, this was, you know, I know what's going on here. A lot of this was clearly influenced by federal agents or informants. It was, okay? But I didn't want to suggest that someone was a federal agent or informant unless I knew for a fact, because you really could get someone in trouble, right? If you're like, this is the guy, and like, but we don't know. I do know I mean, it's very clear that something very strange is going on with Ray Epps. We've named him repeatedly. We've invited him on the show repeatedly. I mean, don't lie to my face. Like, the Ray Epps thing is
right.
You know, isn't organic. Sorry.
Well, and we know from the Proud Boys trial this week that an FBI agent was caught lying on the stand in front of a judge, right? Turns out that the FBI hid evidence from defense attorneys. I mean, this came out in trial. This is not just us, you know, bullshitting here. And that according to the defense attorneys, unless they're lying in this, and that's possible, there was initially thought maybe there were criminal informants there that wanted this information scrubbed, removed from the records. We now know that it actually might have been an agent who wanted this information scrubbed from the records. And of course, we're wondering, oh my gosh, in these 41 hours that Tucker's going to have here, will we be able to see any more evidence of the Fed's involvement? So it appears without that facial recognition, what's the next step then? If we don't have that, what will happen with this footage? Will anyone else be able to kind of go through it with facial recognition? Will Congress be able to do it?
What you need is crowdsourcing here. I mean, you need this to be in as many hands as possible. McCarthy has said, and I don't have ownership of this footage. It's publicly owned, of course. It's not owned by the Congress. They don't own anything. This is like, it's insane, actually, how they treat the U.S. government like they own it. I mean, that's like your housekeeper pretending she owns your bank account. Like, these are our servants, okay? But they get these attitudes, and it's hard to disabuse them of them. But he has said, you know, we're going to turn this over to the public, and that can't come soon enough, as far as I'm concerned. We're a primetime TV show. We're not, you know, in the fabled news division. We're an opinion show, so, you know, we've kind of reached the limits, and it was only our show. Like, there was no other element of the company I work for, and there was no other news organization helping in any way. So I'm not whining, but we've kind of done what we could do. And from my perspective, like, the core claims about January 6th were a lie. It was not a violent insurrection, a deadly insurrection. It was a violent political demonstration, one of many in the year in which it took place. From January of 2020 to January of 2021, there were a lot of violent political demonstrations, including one at the White House where cops were injured, than at January 6th. Though if we could kind of leave it there and stop lying about it, I'm not defending vandalism or hooliganism or violence at January 6th. Of course not. I abhor that. Just don't tell me it's the same as 9/11. If you start talking like that, if you start lying to me, I'm going to push back. Clearly, Nancy Pelosi wanted this to happen. There was a lot of intel that it was going to happen. That intelligence was kept from line officers at the Capitol Police. I know that because I've talked to them, and including some of their supervisors, and they all say the same thing. We were not given this intelligence. Well, why is that? They were the front line in this. Why would you keep it from them? And of course, the answer is you would only do that if you wanted it to be ugly and discrediting for the political party associated with it. And that's obvious. That's obviously what happened. So, like, I'm a conspiracy nut, right? No, I probably should be a little more. I'm way too conventional. That's my problem is that you always used to talk about UFOs when we worked together, and I'd be like, "Wow, Clayton on his UFO thing." Turned out you were totally right on all of it, and that was like a huge lesson to me. You were just more open-minded than I was. And so it's not a matter of like falling for crazy theories. It's a matter of letting the evidence guide your perceptions. Okay? Like, what are we looking at here? Take 3 steps back. What does this look like? Ray Epps telling people to commit violence, but he's not prosecuted. Okay, well, the evidence suggests that this is not what it looks like, obviously. Same with UFOs. Same with the Kennedy assassination. All these areas that are like verboten, you're not allowed to ask questions. Well, why aren't you allowed to ask questions?
Right.
And the last thing I'll say is like, they're not offended by craziness. They're not offended by conspiracy. If you go on TV tonight and say, I think the earth is flat, people just laugh at you. They don't care if you think the earth is flat. It's not a threat to anyone. But if you say like, what actually happened with Building 7? Like, that is weird, right? It doesn't, like, what is that?
Right.
If you were to say something like that on television, they'd flip out. They would flip out. So you'd like lose your job over that. Why? It's my country.
Right.
Is it an attack on my country? Can I ask I don't really understand. Do buildings actually collapse? No, maybe they do. I don't know. But like, why can't I ask questions about that? Anything you're not allowed to ask questions about is something you should be asking more questions about, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it's like Nord Stream, exactly.